It is 3 in the morning. The world outside your window is quiet, draped in darkness and stillness. But inside your mind, a storm is raging. The room is silent, yet your head is filled with a deafening noise. A relentless cascade of thoughts, unresolved worries from yesterday, an endless to-do list for tomorrow, imagined conversations, replayed mistakes, and a vague, persistent anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of it all. This is not a rare night of insomnia. For so many of us, this has become a familiar state of being, a quiet desperation that lingers even in the bright light of day. If you recognize this feeling, know that you are not alone, and this is not a personal failure. It is a symptom of the world we have built, an architecture of anxiety. We live our lives within a structure constructed from the constant pressure to achieve, the pervasive fear of missing out, and the unending assault of information, advertisements, and curated images of happiness that never seem to match our own reality. We are perpetually pulled away from the only moment that is ever real, the present, trapped instead in the ghosts of the past or the phantoms of the future. But this exhaustion, this deep spiritual weariness, is not a new problem. More than 2.5 millennia ago, a man who was then a prince, named Siddhartha Gautama, found himself wrestling with the very same profound questions about human suffering, anxiety, and the nature of existence. His journey was not an attempt to escape from the world, but an unwavering quest to understand the inner workings of the mind itself. The path he discovered, the wisdom he uncovered, is what we now know as Buddhism. But it is essential to see it not as a religion that demands blind faith, but rather as a profound science of the mind, a practical, methodical, and compassionate set of tools and insights designed to help us find peace, not by changing the world outside, but by transforming our relationship to it from within. It offers a way to calm the storm, not by fighting the waves, but by finding the unshakable stillness that lies deep within us, right here, in the midst of the chaos. Our journey into this ancient wisdom begins with a single, foundational observation. It is not a commandment to be believed, nor a complex theory to be memorized, but a simple, honest look at the nature of our own experience. It begins with that subtle hum of dissatisfaction we spoke of, that feeling that persists even when life is, by all accounts, going well. In the language of the Buddha, this is called dukkha. This word is often translated into English as suffering, but that single word is too heavy, too dramatic to capture its full meaning. While dukkha certainly includes the great sorrows and pains of life, its essence is far more subtle, more pervasive. Think of it as a bone-deep unsatisfactoriness, a fundamental stress, a persistent sense of unease. It's the feeling that things are just not quite right. It is the friction that exists between the world as it is and the world as we want it to be. To name this is not an act of pessimism. It is not to say that life is bad or that joy and beauty do not exist. On the contrary, it is an act of profound courage and clarity. It is the first noble truth, and it is noble because recognizing it, understanding it, and facing it directly is the very first step toward its resolution. It is the doctor's diagnosis. Without a clear diagnosis, there can be no effective treatment. The Buddha, like a master physician of the mind, identified 3 distinct types of this fundamental unease. The first is the most obvious, the one we all recognize instantly. It is the suffering of suffering, dukkha dukkha. This is the raw, unavoidable pain of existence. It is the throbbing of a migraine, the sharp sting of betrayal, the hollow ache of grief when we lose someone we love. It is the anxiety of a medical diagnosis, the frustration of being stuck in traffic when you are already late, the chill of loneliness in a crowded room. This form of dukkha is plain to see, an undeniable feature of having a human body and a human heart in an unpredictable world. We spend much of our lives trying to avoid it, to fix it, to numb ourselves to it, but it is an inescapable part of the landscape of our lives. The second type of dukkha is more subtle and perhaps more insidious, for it arises directly from our moments of happiness. This is the suffering of change, viparinama dukkha. Every pleasant experience we have is, by its very nature, temporary. The most beautiful sunset eventually fades into darkness. A wonderful vacation must come to an end. The initial joy of a new relationship matures and changes. The pleasure of a delicious meal is fleeting. The suffering here lies not in the experience itself, but in our clinging to it. It is the anxiety that whispers in our ear, during a perfect moment, this won't last. It's the desperate attempt to hold on to the pleasant feeling, to freeze time, which is as impossible as trying to cup water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Our modern world is a grand theater for this kind of suffering. Our social media feeds are curated museums of fleeting joy, creating a constant pressure to both experience and broadcast a life of perpetual highlights. We chase promotions, new gadgets, and novel experiences, believing they will bring lasting satisfaction, but each one provides only a temporary high, which soon fades, leaving us once again with that familiar hum of unease, now coupled with the faint disappointment that this, too, was not the final answer. The chase itself becomes a source of stress, a relentless cycle of craving and fleeting pleasure, which is its own form of suffering. This leads us to the third and most profound type, the one that truly represents that subtle background hum. This is the suffering of conditioned existence, sankhara dukkha. This is the most difficult to grasp, yet it is the root of the other two. It refers to the inherent unsatisfactoriness of being a self that is constructed, dependent, and constantly in flux. Our bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, our perceptions, everything we identify as mace, not a solid, stable entity. It is a dynamic process, a ceaseless flow of interconnected events. There is a baseline tension and vulnerability that comes with this reality. It is the low-grade, pervasive anxiety that comes from knowing, deep down, that we are not fully in control. It's the feeling of being a temporary arrangement of atoms in a vast, impersonal universe. It is the reason why, even on a day when there is no overt pain and no specific pleasure is fading, we can still feel a sense of restlessness, a need to distract ourselves, a feeling that something is missing. This is the foundational dukkha, the background radiation of a life lived without a deep understanding of its own nature. To see this clearly, let us consider the ancient story of a woman named Kisa Gotami. She lived during the time of the Buddha, and she had a young son whom she loved more than life itself. One day, the child fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, Kisa Gotami refused to accept his death. She clutched the small, lifeless body to her chest and wandered from house to house, begging for a medicine that could restore her son. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man saw her desperation and suggested she go to see the Buddha. She ran to him, laid her child at his feet, and pleaded for the magical cure she was so certain he possessed. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "There is only one thing that can help you. Go into the village and bring me back a single mustard seed. But," he added, It must come from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a spouse, a parent, or a friend. Kisagotami's heart soared with hope. A single mustard seed seemed like such a simple request. She went to the first house she saw and knocked on the door. "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed to cure my son," she said. The woman of the house replied, "Of course, I will give you a seed." But as she went to get it, Kisagotami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Has there been a death in this house?" she asked. The woman's face fell. "You have touched upon my deepest sorrow," she said. "I lost my husband just last year." With a heavy heart, Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. Everywhere she went, the story was the same. People were kind, they were willing to give her the seed, but in every single home, there was a story of loss. One had lost a parent, another, a sibling, another, a beloved friend. The living were few, she began to realize, but the dead were many. As the sun began to set, she sat down by the side of the road, the body of her son still in her lap. She watched the flickering lights of the village appear, only to be extinguished one by one. And in that moment, a profound understanding dawned within her. Her own personal, all-consuming grief was not a unique curse. It was the shared, universal condition of all beings. In that instant, her frantic, selfish desire to save her own son dissolved into a vast, compassionate understanding of the nature of life itself. She had not found the seed from a house without death, but she had found the medicine for her own heart. This story perfectly illustrates the noble truth of dukkha. Our first impulse is to see our own suffering as an anomaly, an injustice, something to be fixed or fought against. Like Kisagotami, we run around seeking a mustard seed, a quick fix from the outside world that will make the pain go away. But the true healing begins when we stop running. It begins when we have the courage to see that this unease, this experience of loss and change, is a fundamental thread in the fabric of existence. To acknowledge this is not to surrender to despair. It is to finally stand on solid ground. It is the beginning of wisdom. It is the moment we stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to ask, with gentle curiosity, "What is this experience? What is its nature?" Having looked honestly at this symptom, this fundamental condition of dissatisfaction, we have now taken the most important step. We have made the diagnosis. Now, we can begin to investigate its cause. What is the precise mechanism in our own minds that takes the raw data of life, the pleasant, the unpleasant, and the neutral, and manufactures from it this pervasive experience of suffering? Having diagnosed the fundamental condition of our unease, that subtle but persistent hum of dukkha, we must now become detectives of our own experience. We must ask the next logical question. If this dissatisfaction is the symptom, what is its direct cause? What is the actual mechanism that creates so much of our anguish? The answer lies in one of the most practical and profound insights offered by the Buddha, a teaching that can, in a single moment of understanding, begin to untangle years of habitual suffering. It is found in the parable of the two arrows. The Buddha said that an ordinary, untrained person, when experiencing something painful, effectively suffers twice. The wise person, however, suffers only once. Imagine a person walking through a forest. Suddenly, they are struck by an arrow. There is an immediate, sharp, and undeniable physical pain. This is the first arrow. It is an unavoidable part of life. Now, imagine that this same person, reeling from the first wound, takes out another arrow and stabs themselves in the very same spot. This is the second arrow. It seems absurd, an act of self-inflicted madness. And yet, this is precisely what most of us do every single day in the landscape of our minds. The first arrow is the raw, objective, and often unavoidable pain of life. It is the headache that arrives without invitation. It is the car that breaks down on the way to an important meeting. It is the criticism you receive from a boss or a loved one. It is the diagnosis from a doctor. It is the grief that comes with loss. These are the givens of existence, the painful events that are, to a large extent, outside of our direct control. The Buddha taught that even a wise and enlightened person still experiences the first arrow. They are not immune to physical pain, loss, or the challenges of human life. To be alive is to be vulnerable to these wounds. The goal of this path is not to build a fortress of indifference or to become a stone, numb and unfeeling. The goal is to learn how to feel the sting of the first arrow without firing the second. The second arrow is the suffering we add on top of the initial pain. It is our reaction to the first arrow. It is entirely mental. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. While the first arrow creates clean pain, the second arrow creates dirty suffering. It is a toxic cocktail of our own making, blended from anger, fear, self-pity, resentment, and blame. Let us examine this second arrow more closely, for it is the true source of our most prolonged torment. When the first arrow strikes, our untrained mind immediately goes to work. It starts with rumination, replaying the event over and over, examining it from every angle, picking at the wound so it can never heal. Then, it begins to weave a narrative, to become a storyteller. The simple, objective fact of the first arrow is no longer enough. It must be embedded in a grand drama. This always happens to me, the mind says, creating a story of victimhood. They did that on purpose to hurt me, it claims, creating a story of persecution. This proves I'm not good enough, it concludes, creating a story of inadequacy. This storytelling is the essence of the second arrow. Let's take a modern, real-life example. Imagine you are unexpectedly laid off from your job. The first arrow is the event itself. You are told your position has been eliminated. There is a real and immediate pain here. There is financial uncertainty, a disruption of your identity, and the sadness of leaving colleagues. This is the first arrow, and it hurts. But then, almost instantly, the second arrows begin to fly. A thought arises. How could they do this to me after all the years I gave them? This is the arrow of indignation and injustice. Another one follows. I'm a complete failure. I should have worked harder. I should have seen this coming. This is the arrow of self-blame. Then another. What will people think of me? Everyone will know I was fired. This is the arrow of shame. And then the mind projects into the future, firing a volley of arrows at once. I'll never find another job. I'm too old. My skills are outdated. We're going to lose the house. These are the arrows of fear and catastrophizing. The initial clean pain of losing a job has now been buried under a mountain of self-inflicted suffering. The original wound may begin to heal, but we keep ourselves in a state of torment for weeks, months, or even years by repeatedly stabbing ourselves with these mental arrows of our own creation. The true tragedy is how automatic this process is. We are so identified with this reactive, storytelling mind that we don't even realize we are the ones holding the bow. But the most liberating teaching in this ancient wisdom is this. If we are the ones firing the second arrow, we are also the ones who can choose to lay down the bow. The power to do this lies in the space between the two arrows. For the untrained mind, this space is almost non-existent. The stimulus of the first arrow and the reaction of the second are fused together in a single, instantaneous explosion. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and rage is immediate. We are criticized, and shame is immediate. But through the practice of mindfulness, which we will explore in detail, we can begin to insert a wedge into this process. We can learn to expand that space. In that precious quiet space between the event and our reaction, we find freedom, we find choice. In that space, we can observe the pain of the first arrow as it is, a pure sensation. It might be a tightness in the chest, a heat in the face, a sinking feeling in the stomach. We can watch it, acknowledge it, and breathe with it, without needing to add the layer of story and judgment. We can choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with habit. Let this become a gentle investigation in your own life. Become a second arrow detective. Notice how this mechanism plays out in small, everyday moments. You post something online and don't get as many likes as you'd hoped. The first arrow is a faint, fleeting feeling of disappointment. The second arrows are, no one cares what I have to say. My life is uninteresting. I am invisible. You wake up feeling tired. The first arrow is the physical sensation of lethargy. The second arrows are, I'm never going to get everything done today. I'm so lazy. The whole day is ruined before it's even started. In each case, the initial discomfort is minimal, but the suffering we create around it can be immense and can color our entire day. Recognizing this pattern is not a cause for more self-blame. It is not another reason to criticize yourself for being reactive. Instead, it is the most hopeful news imaginable. It means that the vast majority of our mental and emotional suffering is not the world's fault. It is self-generated, and anything that is self-generated can be self-dismantled. The pain of life, the first arrow, is inevitable, but the suffering of our own making, the second arrow, is optional. This is the radical promise at the heart of this path. It is the key that can unlock the prison of our own reactivity. So now, we have seen that our own reaction is the primary fuel for our suffering. But what is this reactive mechanism itself? What is this inner storyteller, this relentless commentator, this architect of anxiety that fires these arrows with such speed and precision? To find the answer, we must turn our gaze inward and formally meet the part of us that creates all this noise. We must meet the untamed mind. We have now seen the what and the why. We have diagnosed the fundamental unease of our lives, the condition of dukkha, and we have uncovered its primary mechanism, the self-inflicted wound of the second arrow. This leads us to the most intimate question of all. Who or what is the archer? What is this reactive machine within us, this inner storyteller that takes the simple facts of life and weaves them into such elaborate tapestries of suffering? To answer this, we must formally introduce ourselves to a part of our experience, so constant, so close, that we rarely ever stop to observe it. We must meet the mind in its natural, untrained state. In the lexicon of Buddhist psychology, this state has a wonderfully evocative name, kapasita, or the monkey mind. The metaphor is almost perfect in its accuracy. Imagine a monkey in a tree. It never stays still for long. It grasps one branch, swings to another, pauses for a second, then leaps to a third. It is driven by impulse, constantly restless, searching and moving. Our mind, left to its own devices, behaves in precisely the same way. It swings from a memory of something that happened 20 years ago to a sudden worry about a meeting next week. It leaps to a judgment about a person walking past. then gets snagged by the lyrics of a song stuck in its head. It swings to a fantasy about a future vacation, then drops into an old regret. It is a constant, chaotic, and seemingly uncontrollable cascade of thoughts, images, feelings, and impulses. The first thing to understand, and this is crucial, is that this is not a personal failing. It is not your mind that is uniquely broken or flawed. This is simply what minds do by default. The tendency to wander, to be distracted, to create noise, is the natural, baseline condition of an untrained human mind. To expect it to be silent and still, without any training, is like expecting an untamed puppy to sit perfectly still in a field of squirrels. It is not in its nature. But the ancient teachers of this path knew that for many of us, especially in a world filled with anxiety and overstimulation, the metaphor needs to be even stronger. It is not just a monkey. Imagine, they said, a monkey that has become drunk on wine. Its restlessness is now amplified, its movements more erratic and clumsy. This is the mind intoxicated by craving and desire, constantly grasping for the next pleasant experience. Now, imagine that this drunken monkey is suddenly stung by a scorpion. Its agitation turns to fury and pain. It shrieks and thrashes about wildly. This is the mind provoked by aversion, anger, and resentment when it encounters something it doesn't like. Finally, imagine that as this drunken, stung monkey flails about, it sees its own home, the tree, engulfed in flames. Its agitation turns to sheer terror and panic. This is the mind consumed by the background anxiety and fear that fuels so much of our existence. A drunken monkey, stung by a scorpion, in a burning tree. This may sound extreme, but for many of us, on a difficult day, this is a startlingly accurate portrait of our inner worlder, chaotic maelstrom of desire, frustration, and fear, all happening at once. The real danger, the source of all the trouble, is not the monkey itself. The chaos of the mind is just a natural phenomenon. The problem is that we believe we are the monkey. We are completely identified with its every screech and every leap. When a fearful thought appears in the mind, we don't recognize it as a passing mental event, like a cloud crossing the sky. Instead, we become the fear itself. When a surge of anger arises, we don't see it as a temporary wave of energy. We fuse with it, becoming a vessel of pure anger. We are so lost in the drama, so caught up in the mental movie, that we forget we are the screen on which it is being projected. The spiritual path is not about killing the monkey or getting rid of the thoughts. It is about a radical shift in identity. It is the gradual, profound realization that you are not the chaos. You are the calm, spacious awareness that is witnessing the chaos. You are the sky, not the storm cloud. To make this shift, we must first change our goal. The Buddha often compared the untrained mind to a wild elephant. Left to rampage through a village, it can cause unbelievable destruction. It can trample homes, destroy crops, and harm people. This is the mind lost in second arrows, creating suffering for itself and for others. But that very same elephant, when approached with patience and skill, can be tamed. A tamed elephant is one of the most powerful, gentle, and useful forces imaginable. It can help build temples, carry heavy loads, and act with incredible focus and intelligence. Our mind is this elephant. Untamed, it is our greatest tormentor. Tamed, it becomes our most loyal and powerful ally, a source of profound clarity, unwavering compassion, and boundless creativity. The work is not to destroy the elephant, but to befriend it. And this brings us to the practice of meditation. The There is perhaps no spiritual practice more misunderstood in the modern world. Many of us come to meditation with the belief that its purpose is to stop our thoughts, to empty the mind, to force the monkey into silence. So we sit down, we close our eyes, and we discover that our mind is, in fact, a raging tempest. The thoughts seem to get louder, the restlessness more intense. After a few minutes of struggle, we conclude, I can't do this. I'm no good at meditation. My mind is just too busy. This is a universal experience, born from a fundamental misunderstanding. Trying to stop your thoughts is like trying to command the ocean to be still. The very effort creates more ripples, more tension. Meditation is not a battle against thought. It is the art of changing your relationship to thought. It is the practice of letting the monkey chatter without offering it any more bananas. It is about learning to sit peacefully in the movie theater of your mind, watching the drama on the screen without leaping onto the stage to join the actors. The practice is incredibly simple, though not always easy. It involves learning to rest your attention on one thing, and when the mind wanders, which it will, thousands of times, to gently, kindly, and without any judgment, escort it back. Every time you notice your mind has wandered and you bring it back, you are performing a single repetition of the most important exercise in the world. You are weakening the habit of being lost in thought, and you are strengthening the muscle of awareness. You are slowly, patiently, teaching the monkey that it is safe to rest, that it doesn't need to swing so frantically from branch to branch. You are teaching the elephant that your gentle presence is a safe space. This is the beginning of taming the mind. But to tame a wild creature, you first need to establish a sense of stability. You need a calm, reliable, and trustworthy anchor. An anchor that can hold fast, even when the winds of thought and emotion begin to blow. We do not need to look far for this anchor. We do not need to buy it, or build it, or seek it in a distant land. It has been with us since the moment we were born, and it will be with us until the moment we die. It is as close, as simple, and as vital as our very next breath. We have met the untamed mind, the restless monkey, intoxicated with desire and fear. We have seen how it fires the second arrows that cause our deepest suffering. The question then becomes a practical one. How do we begin the gentle work of taming this creature? How do we introduce a moment of calm into its chaos? We cannot wrestle it into submission. We cannot command it to be silent. We must offer it a place to rest. We need an anchor, something solid and reliable in the midst of the mental storm. That anchor is the breath. It is the most profound and yet the most simple tool we possess. Think about its qualities. Your breath is always with you, from your first cry to your final exhalation. It is utterly portable, requiring no special equipment or environment. It is completely free. And most importantly, the breath is always, unfailingly, in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past. You cannot breathe in the future. To be aware of your breath is to be anchored in the here and now, the only place where life is actually lived. The breath is the bridge between our physical body and our wandering mind, the seam that stitches together the seen and the unseen aspects of our being. To pay attention to it is to come home. The practice of cultivating this attention is known as anapanasati, which simply means mindfulness of breathing. The beauty of this practice lies in its radical simplicity. Let us walk through the instructions, not as a rigid formula, but as a gentle invitation. First, find a posture that embodies both dignity and ease. You can sit on a cushion on the floor, or you can sit in a chair with your feet flat on the ground. The key is to keep your back straight, but not stiff, creating an attitude of alertness. Allow your hands to rest comfortably in your lap, and you can either softly close your eyes or let your gaze rest unfocused on the floor a few feet in front of you. Now, gently bring your attention to the physical sensations of your own breathing. You are not trying to think about the breath, you are trying to feel it. Where do you feel the sensations most distinctly? For some, it is the cool rush of air at the tip of the nostrils on the in-breath, and the warmer air on the out-breath. For others, it is the gentle rise and fall of the chest. For many, it is the expansion and contraction of the abdomen, like a balloon softly inflating and deflating. There is no correct spot. Simply choose one place and allow your awareness to rest there, as if it were a butterfly landing gently on a flower. Your only task is to feel the sensations of one full breath, from the beginning of the inhalation all the way through to the very end of the exhalation. You do not need to change your breath in any way. You do not need to make it deeper or longer. The breath will breathe itself. Your job is simply to watch it, to feel it, to be present with it. And now comes the most important instruction of all. At some point, very soon, your mind will wander. This is not a mistake. This is not a sign that you are failing at meditation. The wandering of the mind is a natural event, like the weather. The moment you notice that your mind has wandered to a thought, a plan, a memory, a sound, that moment of noticing is a moment of mindfulness. It is a moment of success. In that moment, you have woken up from the dream of thought. The instruction is to meet this moment, not with frustration, but with a quiet congratulations. Then, without any criticism or judgment, gently acknowledge where the mind has been thinking, or planning, or worrying, and then, like leading a lost child by the hand, tenderly guide your attention back to the physical sensations of the breath. This process will repeat itself over and over again. Your mind will wander. You will notice it has wandered, and you will gently bring it back. This is the entire practice. The goal is not to achieve a state of perfect, unbroken concentration. The practice is the act of returning. Each time you return your attention to the breath, you are performing one repetition of a sacred exercise. You are fundamentally altering the structure of your mind. You are weakening the old, ingrained neural pathways of distraction and reactivity, and you are strengthening new pathways of calm, focused, present moment awareness. It is crucial to understand that this is an exercise in awareness, not a breathing exercise. We are not manipulating the breath to achieve a certain state. We are using the natural, unforced rhythm of the breath as a stable reference point to train our attention. The breath is our training ground for a quality of awareness that is both gentle and unwavering. While the practice is ancient, modern science has begun to illuminate the profound benefits of this simple act. Physiologically, focusing on the breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system, our body's innate rest and digest system. It acts as a direct antidote to the chronic fight or flight state that so many of us live in, a state fueled by stress, caffeine, and constant stimulation. The simple act of mindful breathing can lower heart rate, reduce blood pressure, and decrease the level of the stress hormone cortisol in our bodies. Psychologically, the effects are even more transformative. The practice strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive functions like concentration, emotional regulation, and wise decision-making. Simultaneously, it helps to calm the amygdala, the brain's primal fear center, which is often overactive in people with anxiety. Over time, it fosters what scientists call metacognition, the ability to see your thoughts as simply thoughts rather than as objective truth. This is the very skill required to avoid firing the second arrow. Imagine a tightrope walker poised to cross a vast, windy canyon. To make it to the other side, he must maintain a state of perfect balance and focus. He cannot be distracted by the cheering of the crowd below, by the memory of a past misstep, or by the fear of the long fall. His entire world must shrink to the feeling of the rope beneath his feet and the intention of his very next step. In this analogy, the canyon is the chaos of our lives. The winds are our distracting thoughts and turbulent emotions, and the rope, stretching from one side to the other, is our breath. By learning to place our attention on the simple, steady, moment-to-moment reality of the breath, we learn to maintain our balance, to walk with grace and stability, even when the winds of life are howling around us. This practice is not confined to a meditation cushion. You can use the breath as a pause button at any moment in your day. When you feel a surge of anger before you speak, when you feel overwhelmed by your to-do list before you begin the next task, when you sit down in your car before you turn the key, you can take just one conscious breath. Feel the full inhalation, feel the full exhalation. This single, intentional breath can be a sanctuary. It creates that precious space between the stimulus and the response, giving you a moment to choose wisdom over reaction. This is how we begin to bring the practice off the cushion and weave it into the very fabric of our lives. We have found our anchor. We have discovered a tool that can steady the mind and gently guide it back to the sanity of the present moment. This anchor does not make the storms of life disappear, but it gives us a stable platform from which to navigate them with greater clarity and strength. It allows the turbulent waters of the mind to settle, so that for the first time, we can begin to see what lies hidden in the depths. Now, with this newfound stability, we are ready to look. We are equipped to investigate the very forces that poison our peace, the energies that make the monkey drunk in the first place. We are ready to turn our attention to the three fundamental poisons of the mind: greed, aversion, and ignorance. With our anchor of the breath providing a steady platform, we can now begin to observe the very forces that create the turbulence in our minds. The Buddhist tradition identifies three primary sources of our inner disquiet, three fundamental energies that poison our peace. They are known as the three poisons, or the Trivisha. These are not external evils to be feared, but internal patterns of the mind to be understood with wisdom and compassion. They are greed, or craving, aversion, or hatred, and delusion, or ignorance. These three are the architects of the second arrow, the fuel for the monkey mind. To find freedom, we must get to know them intimately, starting with the first, the most pervasive, and the most seductive of the three. This is the poison of lobha, a word that translates as craving, grasping, attachment, or thirst. When we hear the word greed, our minds often jump to extreme examples: the miser hoarding his gold, the corporate executive obsessed with profit, the insatiable desire for luxury cars and sprawling mansions. And while lobha certainly includes this kind of material grasping, its territory is vastly larger and infinitely more subtle. It is the constant, low-level wanting that permeates almost every moment of our waking lives. It is the mind's habit of reaching out, seeking to pull something pleasant toward itself, in the hope that it will provide lasting satisfaction. We crave not just things, but experiences. We crave the taste of sugar on our tongue, the feeling of the sun on our skin, the sound of praise in our ears. We crave pleasant emotions. We want to feel happy, excited, secure, and loved. And we cling to these feelings when they arise, dreading the moment they will fade. Perhaps most powerfully, in our modern world, we crave a certain image of ourselves. We grasp at reputation. We want to be seen as intelligent, successful, attractive, or morally upright. This craving fuels our obsession with social media as we meticulously curate our lives and then anxiously check for the validation of likes and positive comments. We even cling to our ideas and opinions. We identify so strongly with our beliefs, our political affiliations, our intellectual positions, that when they are challenged, it feels like a personal attack. We are grasping at a fixed identity, a stable sense of me, in a world that is constantly changing. The nature of this craving is like grasping at smoke. You can see the smoke. It can be beautiful and alluring, but the moment you try to clench your fist around it, you are left with nothing but an empty hand and the lingering scent of your own frustration. Our pleasant experiences, our reputations, our very thoughts are just as ephemeral. The attempt to hold on to them, to make them solid and permanent, is the very definition of futility and a primary source of our dukkha. To understand how this poison works, we can look at its mechanism, a cycle that psychologists today sometimes call the hedonic treadmill. It begins with contact. One of our senses encounters a pleasant object. Our eyes see a beautiful sunset. Our ears hear a beautiful piece of music. Our tongue tastes a delicious piece of cake. This contact gives rise to a pleasant feeling. This feeling, in and of itself, is innocent. But then, the untrained mind, the mind of Loba, immediately latches on. A thought arises. This is good. I like this. I want more of this. This is the birth of craving. Driven by this craving, we grasp. We take a picture of the sunset, desperate to capture it. We play the song again. We reach for a second slice of cake. For a brief moment, we experience a sense of satisfaction. The itch has been scratched, but this satisfaction is inherently unstable. The beauty of the sunset is already fading. The emotional impact of the song is slightly less powerful the second time. The second slice of cake is not quite as satisfying as the first. The pleasure diminishes, and what is left in its place is a faint sense of lack, a renewed restlessness, and so the cycle begins again. The mind starts scanning the environment for the next source of pleasure, the next hit of happiness, believing that this time it will be the one that lasts. We are like hamsters on a wheel, running faster and faster, seeking a destination of permanent satisfaction, without realizing that the wheel itself is the trap. It is vital here to make a distinction between healthy desire and unhealthy clinging. This path is not about becoming a passionless, ambitionless ascetic. Wholesome desires, known in Buddhism as chanda, are essential for a good life. The desire to be a loving parent, the desire to learn a new skill, the desire to help those who are suffering, the desire to be healthy. These are all forms of wholesome intention. They motivate us to act in ways that are beneficial for ourselves and others. The difference lies in the quality of the wanting. Wholesome desire is open-handed. You can work diligently to create a beautiful garden, but if a sudden storm destroys it, you can feel the sadness without being spiritually crushed. Unhealthy clinging, or loba, is tight-fisted. It says, "My happiness depends on this garden thriving." It links our fundamental well-being to an external outcome that is ultimately beyond our control. The pain comes not from the desire for the garden, but from the desperate, white-knuckled attachment to a specific result. Our modern consumer society is a vast and sophisticated engine, designed specifically to generate and exploit lobha. The entire industry of advertising is predicated on its power. Advertisements rarely just sell a product, they sell a story. They sell the promise that this car will bring you freedom, this perfume will bring you love, this watch will bring you respect. They are designed to first create a subtle feeling of lack, of inadequacy, and then to present their product as the cure. They stoke the fire of the hedonic treadmill, ensuring that we are always looking outside of ourselves for the next thing that will finally make us feel whole and happy. There is a classic teaching story that perfectly illustrates the self-imprisoning nature of craving. In a forest, a hunter devised a clever trap for monkeys. He took a coconut, drilled a small hole in it, just big enough for a monkey's open hand to fit through, and placed some rice inside. He then chained the coconut to the base of a tree. Soon, a monkey came along. It smelled the rice, saw the hole, and slipped its slender hand inside, grasping a large fistful of the delicious prize. But when it tried to pull its hand out, the fistful of rice was too big to pass back through the hole. The monkey pulled and screeched, growing more and more frantic. It could see the hunter approaching in the distance. Its heart pounded with terror, but it would not, could not, let go of the rice. Its freedom was just one simple act away, the act of unclenching its fist. But its craving, its attachment to the prize it held in its hand, was so powerful that it chose captivity and capture over the freedom of letting go. We are that monkey. The coconut is our world of captivating experiences, and the rice is whatever we are currently clinging to, a possession, a compliment, a moment of pleasure, an idea about who we are. We believe that possessing the rice is the key to our happiness, and so we grasp it tightly. We fail to see that the grasping itself is the trap. The clinging is the prison. Freedom is always available in the simple, spacious act of opening our hand, of letting go. The antidote to craving is not to forbid ourselves from enjoying the pleasant things in life. It is to cultivate the wisdom of non-attachment. It is to learn how to savor the sweetness of the rice without needing to possess it forever. It is to enjoy the warmth of the sun on our skin, knowing that the clouds will eventually come, and to be okay with that. It is to hold our joys with an open hand, appreciating them while they are here, and allowing them to pass when their time is done, without falling into despair. Craving is this powerful energy of pulling, of trying to absorb the pleasant world into ourselves. But the mind, in its poisoned state, has a corresponding and opposite motion. What does it do when it encounters the things it does not like? What is its strategy for dealing with the painful, the irritating, and the unpleasant? This brings us to the second of the great poisons, the fiery energy of pushing away, the poison of aversion. If craving, loba, is the desperate energy of pulling the pleasant world toward us, its mirror image is the poison of dosa. This is the violent energy of pushing the unpleasant world away, often translated as hatred or anger. Its domain, like that of craving, is far wider and more familiar than we might think. Dosa is the entire spectrum of aversion, a vast family of negativity that ranges from the faintest whisper of irritation to the consuming inferno of rage. To understand this poison, we must first learn to recognize it in all its subtle disguises, for it is a constant companion in our daily lives. At its mildest, dosa manifests as simple irritation or annoyance. It is the flicker of impatience you feel when a website takes too long to load. It is the subtle clenching in your jaw when someone is chewing their food too loudly. It is the flash of frustration when you misplace your keys for the third time in a morning. This low-level static of negativity is so common that we often don't even register it as a form of suffering, yet it constantly corrodes our sense of peace, creating a background of friction and dissatisfaction. As the unpleasantness we encounter grows, so does the intensity of our aversion. Irritation can easily ripen into frustration and anger. This is the feeling that arises when you are stuck in a traffic jam, late for an appointment, feeling utterly powerless. It is the hot surge of anger you feel when you believe you have been treated unfairly or with disrespect. This is the mind in open rebellion against the present moment. It is a declaration of war on reality, held onto over time. This anger hardens into something colder and heavier: resentment. Resentment is the act of keeping past wounds alive, of replaying injustices in the theater of our minds over and over again. We nurse our grievances like precious treasures, refusing to let them go, believing that our bitterness somehow punishes the person who wronged us. At its most extreme, dosa explodes into hatred and rage, a destructive force that aims to annihilate the source of its pain. It is this intense form of aversion that lies at the root of violence, cruelty, and the most terrible atrocities humanity inflicts upon itself. Whether it is a fleeting irritation or a deep-seated hatred, the underlying mechanism of dosa is always the same. It is a profound and painful resistance to what is. When we encounter a person, a situation, or even a feeling within ourselves that we don't like, the mind of aversion screams, "No, I don't want this. This shouldn't be happening." That single thought, "this shouldn't be," is the source of immense suffering. It creates an immediate and exhausting conflict between our desire for a different reality and the unchangeable fact of the reality that is actually here. The external situation may be unpleasant. That is the first arrow, but the true anguish. The second arrow comes from the immense energy we expend in mentally fighting it, in resisting it, in wishing it away. It is like trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. It is a struggle you can never win, and it will only leave you battered and exhausted. There is a powerful saying that perfectly captures the self-destructive nature of this poison. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The person who was the object of our anger may have long forgotten the incident. They may be miles away, sleeping soundly, completely unaware of the turmoil we are in. We, on the other hand, are the ones marinating in our own bitterness. We are the ones bathing our nervous systems in the corrosive stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol. The resentment we carry is a heavy, toxic burden, a poison we willingly drink every day, all while hoping it will somehow harm the other person. It accomplishes nothing except to poison our own present moments in the name of a past that is already gone. So what is the antidote? How do we work with such a powerful and fiery energy? The common approach is suppression. We are taught to be nice, to swallow our anger, to put on a happy face. But this is not the path of wisdom. Suppressed anger does not disappear. It festers beneath the surface, turning into depression, cynical bitterness, or erupting in unexpected and disproportionate ways. The practice taught by the Buddha is not one of suppression, but of mindful investigation. It is the courageous act of turning toward our anger, not to act it out, but to understand it. The practice is to meet the energy of aversion with the light of non-judgmental awareness. When you feel irritation or anger beginning to stir, the first step is simply to acknowledge its presence. Anger is here. You name it, not as my anger, but simply as anger, an impersonal energy passing through. The second step is to shift your attention from the story in your head, the narrative of who is to blame and why you are justified, to the raw, physical sensations of the anger in your body. Where do you feel it? Is it a tightness in the shoulders? A heat flushing your face, a churning in your stomach, a desire to clench your fists? By grounding your awareness in these physical sensations, you unplug from the mental drama that fuels the fire. You are no longer adding second arrows. You are simply being with the raw energy of the first arrow. The third and most transformative step is to ask, with gentle curiosity, what is underneath this anger? Very often, anger is a secondary emotion, a protective shield that our ego uses to cover up something more vulnerable. Like an armor, it makes us feel strong and righteous when we actually feel weak and hurt. If you look underneath your anger, you will almost always find a softer emotion. Perhaps you will find fear, the fear of being harmed, the fear of losing control, the fear of being seen as inadequate. Or perhaps, most often, you will find hurt, the pain of feeling rejected, unseen, misunderstood, or unloved. When you can touch this primary layer of vulnerability with compassion, when you can offer kindness to the part of you that is hurting or afraid, the hard, protective shell of anger often begins to melt away on its own. The story of the Buddha and the murderer, Angulimala, is the ultimate teaching on transforming aversion. Angulimala was a fearsome bandit who terrorized the countryside. His name meant finger garland because he wore a necklace made from the fingers of his 999 victims. One day, he saw the Buddha walking peacefully on the road and decided he would be his 1000th victim. Angulimala, a strong and fearsome warrior, began to run after the Buddha. But a strange thing happened. No matter how fast he ran, he could not close the distance on the Buddha, who continued to walk at a slow, normal pace. Exasperated, Angulimala shouted, "Stop, monk! Stop!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, replied in a calm, clear voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." This enigmatic statement stunned Angulimala into silence. "What do you mean?" he asked. The Buddha explained, "I have stopped all acts of violence, all killing, all harming of living beings. I have laid down the weapons of body and mind. You are still running, fueled by the fires of hatred, causing suffering for yourself and for everyone you meet." In that moment, the Buddha was not meeting Angulimala's violence with more violence, or with fear, which is another form of aversion. He was meeting it with its direct opposite, an unshakable, compassionate calm. This completely disarmed Angulimala. The sheer power of the Buddha's peace extinguished the fire of Angulimala's rage. He threw down his sword, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and in time became a monk. His life utterly transformed. The lesson is profound. You cannot fight fire with fire. You cannot drive out darkness with more darkness. Aversion is only ever overcome by its absence. It is overcome by patience, by compassion, and by wisdom. It is the poison we feed ourselves, and it is a poison for which we also hold the only cure. We have now looked at the great energies of pulling and pushing, craving and aversion, lobha and dosa. They seem to be polar opposites, one driven by desire and the other by hatred. Yet, they are like two wings of the same bird. They are both reactive. They are both expressions of a mind at war with the present moment, and they are both born from a single, deeper source. To understand the root of both craving and aversion, we must now turn our gaze toward the third and most fundamental of the three poisons, the fertile ground from which all suffering grows, the poison of delusion, the deep fog of ignorance. We have now journeyed into the heart of the reactive mind, exploring the powerful energies of craving and aversion, lobha and dosa. We have seen how the mind constantly pulls and pushes, grasps and resists, in a tireless and ultimately futile attempt to secure a permanent state of comfort and security. But we must now ask a deeper question. What is the source of these two powerful currents? What is the root from which both this desperate pulling and this violent pushing arise? The answer lies in the third and most fundamental of the three poisons. It is the very ground in which the other two are nourished. This is the poison of moha, a word best translated as delusion or ignorance. It is absolutely essential to understand what is meant by ignorance in this context. It does not mean stupidity or a lack of factual information. A person can be a brilliant scientist, a celebrated artist, or a successful CEO, possessing vast stores of knowledge, and still be completely submerged in the fog of moha. This ignorance is not an intellectual deficit. It is a profound perceptual blindness. It is a deep and pervasive misunderstanding of the true nature of reality. Imagine you were given a map of a great city, but the map was fundamentally wrong. It showed rivers where there were roads and parks where there were buildings. No matter how intelligently you studied that map, no matter how clever your plans were, you would remain utterly lost. You would be constantly frustrated, surprised, and defeated by the discrepancy between your map and the actual territory. Moha is that flawed map. Delusion is the state of mistaking the map for the territory. We live our lives based on a set of deeply ingrained, often unconscious assumptions about how things are. And these assumptions are fundamentally at odds with reality itself. This delusion is not something we acquire, it is our default setting. It is the primordial fog we are born into. It colors our perception from our very first moments. This fog causes us to make three crucial errors in perception, three fundamental ways in which our inner map is wrong. The first misperception is that we believe things that are inherently impermanent to be permanent. On an intellectual level, we all know that things change. We see the seasons turn. We watch our bodies age. We witness trends come and go. But on a deep, emotional level, we live as though things are stable and lasting. We build our lives and our happiness on foundations of sand, and then we are shocked and devastated when the tide comes in. We cling to our youth, our health, our relationships, and our moments of peak happiness as if they were solid possessions. This belief in permanence is the direct cause of craving. We grasp at pleasant things to try and make them last forever. It is also the direct cause of aversion. We resist unpleasant changes because they violate our deep-seated desire for stability. The second great misperception is that we believe in the existence of a solid, separate, and unchanging self. We have a powerful, intuitive feeling that inside this body and mind, there is a central command module, a CEO, in the headquarters of our being. We call this I, or me. This feeling of being a distinct, continuous self is the cornerstone of our existence. But the wisdom of this path reveals something radical. This solid self is an illusion. What we call the self is not a noun, but a verb. It is not a thing, but a process and ever-changing, interdependent flow of physical sensations, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. There is no permanent CEO, only a constantly shifting committee. It is this mistaken belief in a solid self that is the root of all our ego-driven suffering. We spend our lives polishing, promoting, and defending this illusory self. We feel its pride, we suffer its slights, we fear its annihilation. The entire drama of our lives revolves around a character that is, upon close inspection, nowhere to be found. The third great misperception is a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of dukkha itself. As we explored, we see suffering and dissatisfaction not as an intrinsic part of life to be understood, but as an external problem to be solved. We believe that our inner lack, that subtle hum of unease, can be cured by acquiring something from the outside world. If only I could get that promotion, we think, then I would be content. If only I could find the perfect partner, then I would be happy. If only I could afford that house, then I would feel secure. This delusion keeps us running on the hedonic treadmill, endlessly rearranging the furniture on the outside in a futile attempt to fix an unease that originates on the inside. It is this misunderstanding that directly fuels the endless cycle of craving. In our modern age, there is no greater factory for moha than the world of social media. It is a perfect incubator for these delusions. We scroll through feeds that present highly curated, edited, and filtered snapshots of life, and our deluded minds mistake these images for a continuous reality. We see the joyful vacation photos and believe in the existence of permanent happiness. We see the carefully constructed personal brands and believe in the solidity of those manufactured selves. And in doing so, we feel a deep sense of our own inadequacy, a painful form of dukkha, which then sends us spiraling into either craving what others appear to have or aversion toward our own perceivedly flawed lives. If moha is the poison of darkness and fog, its antidote is light. This light is called panna, a word that means wisdom or insight. But again, this is not the wisdom of accumulated facts. It is the wisdom of direct seeing. It is the experience of looking at your own mind and at the world so clearly, so honestly, that the illusions simply dissolve in the face of the truth. There is a classic story that illustrates this perfectly. A man is walking along a path at dusk. As the light fades, his eyes fall upon a shape coiled in the middle of the path. Instantly, his mind identifies it, a venomous snake, poised to strike. His heart begins to pound in his chest. His palms sweat. His body freezes in terror. The entire experience of suffering, the fear, the panic, the physical stress is absolutely real for him. He is suffering immensely. A moment later, a friend approaches from the other direction, carrying a lantern. Seeing the man's terror, the friend raises the lantern and shines its light on the path. In that bright, clear light, the man sees the object for what it truly is. Not a snake, but a harmless piece of coiled rope. In that single instant, his suffering vanishes. The fear evaporates. The pounding in his heart subsides. He did not need to fight the snake, or run from it, or perform some complicated ritual to appease it. All that was needed was light. The suffering, though real, was based on a complete illusion. In this story, we are the man. The darkness of the dusk is moha, our state of delusion. The rope is reality, as it is impersonal, neutral, harmless. The snake is the terrifying world created by our own mind-sour anxieties, our ego threats, our attachments and aversions. The lantern is the light of panna, of wisdom, and the friend who brings the lantern is the guide, the teachings that show us where to look. This story reveals that freedom from suffering is not about becoming stronger or tougher, but about seeing more clearly. The root poison of moha is not a moral failing to be condemned, but a perceptual error to be corrected. So, how do we begin to light our own lantern? How do we start to dispel the fog? We must do it by turning our attention away from the phantoms and toward the raw data of reality itself. We must become scientists of our own experience, patiently investigating the fundamental laws that govern our existence. The first, most essential, and most transformative of these laws is the universal truth that everything, without exception, is in a constant state of flux. We must begin our journey into wisdom by looking deeply into the nature of impermanence, the truth of anicca. To begin dispelling the deep, pervasive fog of delusion, we must become our own scientists, We must learn to turn on our own inner lantern and look at the world not through the lens of our hopes and fears, but with a quiet, steady, and honest curiosity. The wisdom of the Buddha points us toward three fundamental characteristics of all existence, three universal truths that can be verified by anyone who cares to look closely at their own experience. These are known as the Tilakkhana, or the three marks of existence. They are anicca, impermanence; dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness we have already diagnosed; and anatta, no, self. These are not doctrines to be believed, but realities to be seen. Our first investigation, the first great beam of light that cuts through the fog, is the direct seeing of anicca, the universal truth of impermanence. When we first hear the idea that everything is impermanent, our initial reaction might be one of sadness or even nihilism. If everything fades, if nothing lasts, what is the point? It can sound like a bleak and pessimistic philosophy, but this is a profound misunderstanding. The truth of impermanence is not a flaw in the universe. It is the universe. Change is not something that happens occasionally. It is the very nature of everything that exists. And to see this clearly, to accept it fully, is not a path to despair. It is the key to unlocking a life of profound freedom, deep gratitude, and radical presence. Let us begin by observing impermanence in the world around us. Look at the natural world, the greatest teacher of anicca. The seasons turn in an endless, graceful cycle. Spring bursts forth with new life, which swells into the fullness of summer, which then gracefully decays into the colors of autumn, before resting in the stark silence of winter. A magnificent oak tree appears to be a symbol of strength and permanence, yet it began as a tiny acorn and will one day return to dust. A mountain range, the very symbol of solidity, is in a constant, slow-motion dance of uplift and erosion, worn down over millennia by the gentle insistence of wind and rain. Nothing stands still. Look at the objects you own. The new car gets its first dent. The favorite sweater eventually frays at the cuffs. The cutting-edge smartphone you once cherished now seems slow and obsolete. Everything we possess is in a state of decay from the moment it is created. This external observation is easy. The more profound and transformative practice is to turn this investigative lens inward and observe the ceaseless flow of change within our own being. Consider your body. It feels solid, like a single, continuous entity that you have inhabited your entire life. But in reality, your body is a flowing river of processes. Scientists tell us that millions of your cells are dying and being replaced every single second. The person you were, physically, 7 years ago, is almost entirely gone, replaced by new matter. The face you see in the mirror is subtly different from the one you saw yesterday. Health and sickness are not permanent states. They are temporary conditions. Our bodies are not static sculptures. They are dynamic ecosystems in constant flux. Now, turn your awareness to your feelings and emotions. Here, the truth of anicca is startlingly clear. No emotion lasts forever. Think of a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. It arises. It fills your being. It feels as though it will last forever. And then, it softens, changes, and fades, replaced by something else. Think of a wave of intense anger or deep sadness. In the moment, it can feel all-consuming, as if you have fallen into a dark pit from which you will never escape. But it too changes. It rises, peaks, and eventually, it passes. By observing this endless parade of feelings coming and going, we learn a crucial lesson. We learn not to cling so desperately to the pleasant feelings, which only creates suffering when they inevitably change. And we learn not to be so terrified of the unpleasant feelings, knowing that they too are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. We learn to let the river of emotion flow through us, without building a dam. And what about our thoughts? They are the most ephemeral and fleeting phenomena of all. Sit quietly for just a minute and watch them. Like clouds scudding across the sky on a windy day, they appear from nowhere, take a certain shape, and then dissolve back into nothingness. A memory, a plan, a judgment, a worrying after another, an endless stream. When we truly see this, when we witness the transparent, insubstantial nature of our own thoughts, we stop taking them so seriously. We stop believing that every thought is a factual bulletin from reality's command center. They are simply mental weather, impersonal events arising and passing away in the vast sky of the mind. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice." This is a perfect Western expression of anicca. Why can you not step in the same river twice? He explained, "For it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. The water that flowed over your foot a moment ago is now downstream, gone forever, replaced by new water. The river is a process, not a static thing. And you, the man who steps into it, are also different. In the moment, between the first step and the second, your cells have changed. Your thoughts have changed. Your mood has changed. You are also a process. Life is not a series of still photographs. It is a flowing, dynamic, unstoppable river. All of our suffering comes from our attempt to deny this fundamental truth. We try to build a permanent home in the middle of this flowing river. We try to dam it up to hoard the pleasant moments, and we try to build levees to ward off the unpleasant ones. But the river of reality is always more powerful. Wisdom lies not in fighting the current, but in learning to swim with it, to move with its grace and power. When we fail to see impermanence, we are doomed to suffer. Our craving, lobha, is a direct consequence of this blindness. We grasp at a happy moment, a loving relationship, or a youthful appearance as if we could freeze it in time, and we suffer when our grip inevitably fails. Our aversion, dosa, is also born of this blindness. We resist an unpleasant feeling or a difficult situation as if it were a permanent state, and we suffer from the exhausting and futile struggle against it. Seeing that all states, both pleasant and unpleasant, are by their very nature fleeting, allows us to meet them with a new sense of balance and ease. The grip of both craving and aversion begins to loosen. This understanding is not a cause for sadness. It is a profound gift. It is the very impermanence of life that makes it so precious. We savor a stunning sunset precisely because we know it will not last. We cherish the time with our loved ones precisely because we know it is finite. The truth of anicca is a powerful call to show up for our lives, to be fully present for the beauty and the sorrow, for the joy and the pain, because this moment, right now, is the only one we will ever have. It is also a source of immense hope. In our darkest hours, in times of grief, failure, or despair, the wisdom of impermanence is a compassionate friend, whispering, "This too shall pass." No matter how intense the pain, it is not your final destination. It is a temporary weather pattern that will, in time, give way to clear skies. We have now bathed our minds in the light of anicca, seeing that everything we can perceive, both outside and inside ourselves, is in a state of constant, unrelenting flow. Our bodies are rivers of cells. Our minds are rivers of thoughts and feelings. This leads us to the next, most profound, and perhaps most challenging question on this path. If everything is changing, who is it that is aware of all this change? If the river is always new, what of the one who steps into it? Is there a solid, unchanging I at the center of it all, watching the river flow by? This question leads us directly into the heart of the next great mark of existence, the liberating and radical truth of anatta, the truth of no self. We have arrived at a doorway, a threshold in our journey of understanding. To cross it, we must be willing to question the most fundamental assumption of our entire lives, the very bedrock of our identity. It is a concept that can feel, at first, like the ground is dissolving beneath our feet. But if we stay with it, if we have the courage to look deeply, it becomes the very source of unshakable freedom. We have spoken of the second arrow, the arrow of suffering that we shoot into ourselves. But now we must ask the most profound question of all. Who, exactly, is this self that feels so wounded? For centuries, we have operated on the belief that inside each of us, perhaps located somewhere behind the eyes, is a core being, a permanent, unchanging me, an executive in the control room of the body and mind. We call it by our name, we defend its honor, we worry about its future, and we grieve for its past hurts. But the wisdom of the Buddha invites us to do something radical. It asks us to look for this self, to search for it, not with intellectual argument alone, but with the clear, steady light of awareness. And when we do, we discover the liberating truth of anatta, or no self. This does not mean that you do not exist. You are here, reading these words, breathing, thinking, feeling. The teaching of no self is not a declaration of non-existence. It is a description of the nature of your existence. It suggests that you do not exist as a separate, solid, permanent entity. Instead, you exist as a dynamic, flowing, ever-changing process. You are not a noun, you are a verb. You are not a thing, you are a happening. To understand this, Buddhism offers a practical map. It deconstructs our experience of a self into 5 distinct, flowing processes, known as the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. Imagine standing by a river. You can point to it and say, "River," but what you are pointing at is a constantly changing flow of water. The 5 aggregates are like the currents that make up the river of our being. The first is form, or rupa. This is the physical body. We so often identify with it. This is my hand, this is my face. But is it a fixed thing? Science tells us that our cells are constantly dying and being replaced. The body you have today is not, on a cellular level, the same body you had 7 years ago. It is a slow-motion waterfall of matter, built from the food you have eaten, the water you have drunk, the air you have breathed. It is entirely dependent on the world outside of it. If you look for a permanent, unchanging body that has existed since your birth, you will not find it. It is a process of forming, not a static form. The second aggregate is feeling, or vedana. These are the raw sensations that arise from contact with the world, classified as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The warmth of the sun on your skin, the sharp pain of a stubbed toe, the neutral feeling of your back against a chair. These feelings arise, linger for a moment, and then vanish, replaced by the next. They are fleeting, ephemeral, like bubbles on the surface of water. Are you these feelings? If you were, your self would die and be reborn with every passing sensation. Thousands of times a day, we spend so much of our lives chasing pleasant feelings and running from unpleasant ones, believing that they define our happiness or misery. But they are just weather patterns passing through the vast sky of awareness. They are not who you are. The third aggregate is perception, or sana. This is the faculty that recognizes and labels. It's the part of the mind that says blue, tree, car, threat, opportunity. When a pleasant feeling arises, perception might label it happiness. When an unpleasant feeling arises, it might label it injustice. These perceptions are based on our past experiences, our conditioning, our culture. They are not an objective reading of reality, they are an interpretation. A dog perceives a whistle in a way a human cannot. A painter perceives shades of color a layperson misses. Our perceptions are constructs, mental labels that we project onto the world. They are useful for navigating life, but they are not a core, essential self. They are learned habits of the mind. The fourth aggregate is perhaps the one we most identify with: mental formations, or sankhara. This is the vast, churning ocean of our thoughts, our opinions, our biases, our intentions, our moods, our habits, our dreams, and our fears. It is the voice in the head that narrates our life, the one that judges, plans, worries, and desires. This is the monkey mind we spoke of earlier, constantly swinging from one thought branch to another. If we observe this stream of mental activity, we see that it is wild, chaotic, and profoundly impermanent. A thought of anger can be replaced by a thought of food, which can be replaced by a memory from childhood, all within a matter of seconds. To believe that this turbulent, unreliable stream of chatter is the real me is to build our house on a foundation of shifting sand. These mental formations are actions, or karma, creating ripples into the future, but they are not a solid entity. Finally, the fifth aggregate is consciousness, or vijnana. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the basic awareness that makes all other experience possible. There is seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, thinking consciousness. But even this is not a singular, monolithic soul. Consciousness, in this teaching, arises in dependence upon conditions. Seeing consciousness cannot arise without an eye and a visible object. Hearing consciousness cannot arise without an ear and a sound. It is not a continuous spotlight shining from within, but rather a series of discrete moments of knowing, flickering in and out of existence, like the frames of a movie that create the illusion of a continuous picture. It is the screen upon which the movie of our life plays, but it is not the characters in the movie. To make this profound idea more concrete, there is a famous and beautiful story from the Buddhist texts. It concerns a wise and powerful Greek king named Milinda, who ruled a kingdom in what is now India. He was a brilliant debater, and he delighted in challenging the local spiritual teachers. One day, he heard of a Buddhist sage named Nagasena, renowned for his clarity and wisdom. The king went to meet him, determined to test his understanding. After the initial greetings, King Milinda asked, "Venerable sir, what is your name?" Nagasena replied, "I am known as Nagasena, Your Majesty. But this is only a designation, a name in common use. For in the ultimate sense, there is no permanent person or self to be found here." The king, a master of logic, was intrigued. He began to cross-examine the monk. "If there is no person," the king asked, "then who is it that wears these robes and takes this food? If I were to kill you, would there be no murderer? Who is Nagasena?" He then began to dissect the monk's being. "Is your hair Nagasena?" "No, Your Majesty." "Are your nails, your teeth, your skin, your body Nagasena?" To each question, Nagasena calmly replied, "No, Your Majesty." The king was triumphant. "Then, I do not see any Nagasena. Nagasena is just a sound, a lie." But then, the sage, with a gentle smile, turned the questioning back on the king. "Your Majesty, You are a great king. You came here on foot, or in a chariot. I do not travel on foot, sir, the king replied proudly. I came in a chariot. Very good, said Nagasena. Then please, show me the chariot. Is the pole the chariot? No, venerable sir, said the king. Is the axle the chariot? Are the wheels, the frame, the ropes, the yoke, the whip, the chariot? To each question, the king had to answer, no, venerable sir. Nagasena continued. Then is the chariot all of these parts put together? No, sir. Then is the chariot something separate, outside of these parts? No, venerable sir. Nagasena then looked at the king and said, Your Majesty, you have said that you came here in a chariot, but when I ask you to show me the chariot, you cannot find it. Is chariot, then, just a sound, a lie? The king was humbled and silent. Nagasena explained, just as chariot is a convenient name, a designation we give to a collection of parts assembled in a certain way, so Nagasena is a convenient name for this collection of 5 aggregates: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. But if you search for a separate, unchanging Nagasena or a chariot essence apart from its components, it cannot be found. This is the heart of anatta, and in this understanding lies immense liberation. Think of how much of our daily anxiety comes from defending, protecting, and promoting this imaginary self. We feel insulted when someone criticizes us because we believe a solid me has been attacked. But what if the criticism is just sound waves hitting an eardrum, giving rise to an unpleasant feeling, and a story of I am being wronged, all of which are impermanent processes? The second arrow has no target to hit. We feel anxious about our image, spending our energy trying to appear successful, intelligent, or attractive. But what if this image is just a construct, a story we tell ourselves and others? We can relax. We can be authentic. When we stop clinging so tightly to the idea of a separate self, our defensiveness softens. Our need to be right diminishes. Our fear of failure lessens. A profound sense of ease begins to permeate our being. We stop taking everything so personally. This does not lead to passivity. On the contrary, it allows for more spontaneous and compassionate action, free from the heavy baggage of the ego. When we see that I am a flowing process, we can more easily see that you are also a flowing process. The hard, artificial line between self and other begins to dissolve. If there is no truly separate self, then what is the nature of the relationship between this process called me and all the other processes that make up the world? This leads us directly to the next great truth, the interconnected web of all existence. If the self is not a solid thing, but a flowing process, a gathering of streams, then we must ask, where do these streams come from? And where do they go? Does this river of a self flow in isolation, or is it part of a greater watershed, a vast and intricate system of causes and conditions that permeates everything? The wisdom that answers this question is perhaps the most profound and central teaching in all of Buddhism. It is the missing piece that connects the truth of no self to the reality of the world we live in. It is called paticca samuppada, or dependent origination. It is the ultimate antidote to the painful illusion of separation, the deep-seated feeling of loneliness that haunts the modern psyche. The teaching can be summarized in a simple, elegant formula, a statement of cosmic law that is as fundamental as gravity. When this is, that is. When this is not, that is not. From the arising of this, that arises. From the ceasing of this, that ceases. This is not a metaphysical belief to be accepted on faith. It is an invitation to observe the nature of reality itself. It tells us that nothing, absolutely nothing, exists independently. Everything arises in dependence upon other things. Nothing springs into being from nowhere. Everything is a co-creation, a confluence of innumerable causes and conditions. Let us make this tangible. Take something as simple as this very moment, this experience of you listening to these words. This moment cannot exist by itself. It depends on the existence of the technology that recorded these words and the electricity that powers the device you are using. It depends on the existence of the English language, a vast, evolving system created by millions of people over thousands of years. It depends on the existence of the person speaking and the food, water, and air that sustain that person. It depends on your ears to hear and your mind to comprehend. If you remove any one of these conditions, this moment of hearing and understanding vanishes. It is radically dependent on a web of factors that stretches out in every direction through time and space. You do not exist separately from this moment, and this moment does not exist separately from the entire universe that supports it. This is the meaning of interconnectedness. There is a beautiful teaching from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh that illuminates this with perfect clarity. He invites us to look deeply at a single sheet of paper. On the surface, it seems to be a simple, separate object. But if we look with the eyes of wisdom, we can see things differently. We can see a cloud floating in the sky. Without the cloud, there is no rain. Without the rain, the trees cannot grow. And without the trees, we cannot make paper. So the cloud is in the sheet of paper. If we look deeper, we can see the sunshine. Without the life-giving energy of the sun, the tree cannot perform photosynthesis and grow strong. So the sunshine is also in the sheet of paper. And if we continue to look, we can see the logger who cut down the tree. We can see his arms, his muscles. We can see the wheat that became the bread he ate for breakfast, and the farmer who grew that wheat. We can see his parents and their parents, stretching back through generations. All of them are present in this single sheet of paper. We can see the earth that nourished the tree's roots, the factory that processed the pulp, the driver who transported it. The paper, in fact, contains the entire cosmos. It cannot be by itself. It can only interbe with everything else. The word for this is emptiness, or shunyata. The paper is empty of a separate, independent self, but it is precisely because it is empty of a separate self that it can be full of everything else. Your existence is just like this sheet of paper. You are empty of a separate, isolated self, and because of that, you are full of the entire universe. This understanding shatters the prison of loneliness. So much of our modern suffering comes from the feeling of being an isolated ego, a single, vulnerable self struggling against a vast and indifferent world. We feel we must protect ourselves, compete for resources, and build walls around our hearts. But dependent origination reveals this to be a tragic misperception. The world is not something separate from you that you must fight against. You are an expression of the world. You are the universe, experiencing itself. Your breath connects you to the atmosphere, to the plankton in the sea, and the forests on the land that produce the oxygen you need. The water in your body was once in a river, a cloud, an ocean. The atoms that make up your hand were forged in the hearts of distant, long-dead stars. When you see this, not just as a beautiful idea, but as a living reality, the feeling of alienation begins to melt away. How can you feel lonely when the entire cosmos is breathing with you in every moment? There is another powerful image used to describe this reality, known as Indra's net. Imagine, in the heavenly palace of the ancient deity, Indra, there hangs a vast and wonderful net. It stretches out infinitely, in all directions, and at every single knot, at every intersection of the net's threads, there is a single, perfectly clear, multifaceted jewel. The net is structured in such a way that if you look closely at the polished surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire net. And not only that, but each of the jewels reflected in this one jewel also reflects all the other jewels, so that the process of reflection is infinite and holographic. Each jewel represents a single point in the universe, a person, a thought, a blade of grass. Each jewel has its own unique position and perspective, and yet its very substance contains the entirety of the cosmos. You are one of these jewels. Your being reflects every other being. The joy of another is reflected in you. The suffering of another is reflected in you. In my heart, I can see your reflection. In your heart, you can see mine. There is no ultimate separation. This is not just abstract philosophy. It is the very foundation of ethics and compassion. If we are all interconnected in this profound way, then every action, every word, and every thought has ripples that spread out through the entire net. Harming another person or any living being is no longer an isolated act. It is like sending a tremor through the web that will inevitably come back to affect us. It is like one part of a body attacking another part. It is, in the deepest sense, an act of self-harm. Conversely, an act of kindness, of generosity, of compassion is an act that heals and strengthens the entire web. When you wish for another person to be happy, you are polishing not only their jewel, but your own as well. Compassion, then, is not a moral duty imposed from the outside. It is the natural, intelligent response to seeing the world as it truly is. It is the heart's recognition of its own interconnectedness. The walls of the ego, which create the categories of me versus you, us versus them, are seen for what they are, illusions. With this wisdom of our selfless nature and our profound interconnectedness, a new question arises. How, then, should we act? How do we live our daily lives in a way that honors this truth? Our journey now moves from the realm of profound wisdom to the realm of skillful action. And the most common way we act in the world, the most frequent way we interact with the other jewels in the net, is through our words. This brings us to the first step of ethical living, the power of right speech. Having seen that we are not isolated islands, but interconnected jewels in a vast cosmic net, our perspective on action begins to shift. If every part of the web is connected, then every vibration we send out matters. The most common, and often most unconscious, way we send these vibrations is through our speech. Words are not mere sounds. They are potent forces. They are containers of intention. A single word can start a war or inspire a revolution of peace. It can shatter a heart or mend one that is broken. In the Buddhist path, speech is not taken lightly. It is recognized as a profound form of action, a type of karma that shapes our reality moment by moment. Every word we utter is a seed we plant. Some seeds grow into flowers of understanding and connection. Others grow into thorny weeds of conflict and pain. The practice of right speech, or samavaka, is the art of cultivating a beautiful garden in our lives and in the lives of others, instead of a tangled, painful thicket. It is the first practical application of wisdom and compassion in our daily interactions. This practice is traditionally broken down into 4 clear guidelines, 4 ways to ensure our words are seeds of healing rather than harm. The first, and the foundation for all the others, is to speak truthfully. This means more than simply avoiding blatant lies. It means speaking with integrity, with an intention to represent reality as we understand it, without distortion for personal gain. It's a commitment to being a reliable source of information, a person whose words can be trusted. But truthfulness is also wedded to wisdom and compassion. The path does not advocate for a kind of brutal honesty that uses truth as a weapon to hurt others. Before we speak, even if the words are true, we are encouraged to ask, is this the right time? Is this the right place? Is it helpful? Will it be received? Sometimes, the most truthful and compassionate act is a noble silence. Speaking the truth is about building a world of trust, not a world of painful accusations. It is about making our inner world and our outer expression one and the same. The second guideline is to abstain from divisive speech. This is the act of refusing to use words to poison one person's mind against another. It includes slander, backbiting, carrying tales, and spreading gossip that creates factions and erodes community. It is a conscious choice to not be a wedge that drives people apart. In our modern world, so often fueled by an us versus them mentality, this practice is a radical act of peacemaking. It is easy to find a temporary sense of belonging by bonding with others over a shared dislike of someone else. Divisive speech thrives on this insecure part of our ego. The practice of right speech asks us to rise above it. It challenges us to be a force for reconciliation, to look for the good in others, and to use our words to build bridges of understanding, not walls of suspicion. It is the commitment to seeing the whole net, not just our little corner of it, and acting for the benefit of all. The third aspect is to avoid harsh speech. This addresses the raw, aggressive energy we can unleash with our mouths. It covers insults, yelling, abusive language, sarcasm intended to wound, belittling comments, and any words spoken out of anger and ill will. Harsh speech is a direct verbal assault. It plants seeds of fear, resentment, and low self-worth in the person who receives it, and it pollutes the heart of the person who speaks it. The antidote is to cultivate speech that is gentle, kind, soothing, and affectionate. It is to speak to others, even during disagreements, with the same respect and care we would wish for ourselves. This doesn't mean we can never express dissatisfaction or set boundaries, but it means we do so skillfully without the poison of aggression. It is the recognition that every person, no matter their actions, is a jewel in the net, deserving of basic dignity. The fourth and final guideline is to refrain from idle chatter. This might be the most subtle and challenging practice in our age of constant communication. Idle chatter is speech that is pointless and frivolous. It is the mindless gossip about celebrities, the endless commentary on trivialities, the nervous talk that fills every available space of silence. It is speech without purpose that dissipates our mental energy and distracts us from what is truly important. Practicing this does not mean we must become stern and humorless. Joyful and light-hearted conversation has its place. Rather, it is an invitation to value our words and to value silence. It is to speak with intention. Before contributing to a conversation, we can silently ask ourselves, is what I am about to say true? Is it kind? Is it beneficial? Is it necessary? Often, we will find that it is not, and we can simply relax and enjoy the silence. This practice helps us conserve our energy, quiet the monkey mind, and develop a more focused and peaceful inner landscape. In our 21st century, these ancient guidelines have never been more relevant. The public square has expanded to include the entire internet, and with it, the potential for both skillful and unskillful speech has magnified 1,000-fold. Right speech must now be applied to our emails, our text messages, our social media posts, and our comments. Truthfulness requires us to resist the urge to share misinformation and to take a moment to fact-check before we click share. Avoiding divisive speech means refusing to join online mobs or pile on in digital shaming campaigns. Avoiding harsh speech means remembering that behind every username and avatar is a living, feeling human being, and choosing not to type the cruel words we might never say to their face. And avoiding idle chatter might mean being more mindful of what we consume and contribute online, choosing to add to the signal rather than the noise. But right speech is only half of the equation. The other, equally important half, is right listening, or deep listening. This is the practice of offering our full, undivided, and compassionate attention to another person. It means listening not just to their words, but to the feelings and needs behind the words. It means setting aside our own agenda, our own need to reply, to fix, or to judge, and simply being present with them. This kind of listening is one of the most profound gifts we can offer. It creates a space of safety and trust where true healing and connection can occur. When someone feels truly heard, their own inner wisdom often emerges to solve their problems. Deep listening is an act of supreme generosity and a cornerstone of any healthy relationship. There is a powerful story that illustrates the irreversible nature of our words. A man in a village spread a vicious rumor about a respected elder. A few days later, consumed by guilt, he went to the town's wise sage and confessed, "I have done a terrible thing," he said. "My words were false and have caused great harm. How can I take them back?" The sage looked at him and said, "There is one thing you can do. Go home, take your finest feather pillow, climb to the top of the highest hill, and, on a windy day, cut it open and release all the feathers." The man, though confused, was desperate to atone, so he did exactly as he was told. He watched as the wind caught the thousands of tiny feathers and scattered them across the fields and forests for miles around. He then returned to the sage and said, "I have done as you asked." The sage replied, "Good. Now for the second part of your task. Go back out and gather every single one of those feathers and put them back in the pillow." The man looked aghast. "But that's impossible," he cried. "The wind has taken them everywhere. I will never be able to find them all." The sage nodded slowly. "Precisely," he said. "And so it is with your words. Our words are actions, potent seeds scattered on the wind. This understanding of speech as a form of karma naturally leads us to look at our other actions. For just as our words create our world, so too do the deeds we perform with our body and our hands. This brings us to the next element of the path, the power of right action. From the seeds of our words, we now turn to the earth of our actions. Having understood that our speech is a powerful form of karma, shaping our inner and outer worlds, we now broaden our lens to encompass everything we do. This brings us to the concept of karma itself, a word that is widely known in the West, but often deeply misunderstood. For many, karma is imagined as a kind of cosmic justice system, a divine ledger of good and bad deeds, where we are rewarded or punished in a future life for our current behavior. It is often confused with fate or destiny. a sense that our lives are predetermined by forces beyond our control. The Buddhist understanding of karma, however, is something far more immediate, practical, and empowering. The word karma, in its original language, simply means action, and the law of karma is simply the law of cause and effect as it applies to our intentional actions. It is not a judgment from an external God, but a natural, impersonal law of the universe, as reliable and observable as the law of gravity. The absolute heart of this teaching lies in one crucial element: intention. The Buddha himself said, "It is intention, monks, that I call karma. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind." This is a revolutionary statement. It means the moral and psychological weight of an action is not determined by its outcome, which can often be unpredictable, but by the quality of the intention that precedes it. Imagine you are walking down a crowded street, and you accidentally stumble and bump into someone, knocking their bag from their hand. There is an action and a result. Now, imagine walking down that same street, seeing someone you dislike, and intentionally shoving them so they drop their bag. The external action is almost identical, but the inner intention, the cetana, is worlds apart. In the first case, the intention was neutral. It was an accident. In the second, the intention was rooted in ill will and a desire to cause harm. The karmic seed planted by the second action is profoundly different and far heavier than the first. This understanding places power and responsibility squarely back in our own hands, or, more accurately, in our own minds. Our life is not shaped by random external events alone, but by how we choose to respond to them, by the intentions we cultivate from one moment to the next. To demystify this further, we can use the beautiful and simple analogy of a farmer. The law of karma is the law of agriculture. Our mind is a garden. Our intentions are the seeds. Our actions of body, speech, and mind are the act of planting. The circumstances of our life are the harvest. If a farmer meticulously plants tomato seeds, giving them water and sunshine, he will, in due time, harvest tomatoes. If he carelessly scatters the seeds of a poisonous weed, he will harvest a field of poisonous weeds. The farmer cannot plant weed seeds and then get on his knees and pray to the sky for a harvest of tomatoes. He cannot blame the soil or the weather or bad luck when his field is full of thorns. The result is inherent in the cause. The nature of the harvest is determined by the nature of the seed that was planted. In the same way, if we consistently plant seeds of anger, greed, and jealousy through our intentional actions, we cannot be surprised when our lives are filled with conflict, dissatisfaction, and fear. If we consistently plant seeds of kindness, generosity, and forgiveness, we cannot help but, in time, experience a life of greater peace, connection, and well-being. This is not magic, it is nature. But how do we know which seeds are wholesome and which are weeds? To help us navigate this, the Buddhist path offers a set of practical guidelines known as the 5 precepts. These are not rigid commandments handed down from on high to be followed out of fear of punishment. They are voluntary training principles, like the advice a wise farmer would give to a novice. They are loving guardrails on the path, designed to protect ourselves and others from harm, and to help us cultivate a beautiful and fruitful garden. The first precept is to refrain from taking life. At its most basic, this means not killing other sentient beings. But on a deeper level, it is a cultivation of ahimsa, or non-harming, a reverence for all life. It is the practice of gentleness, of treading lightly on the earth, of seeing the desire to live in every being, just as it exists in ourselves. The second precept is to refrain from taking what is not given. This is the practice of cultivating generosity and contentment. It is more than just not stealing money or objects. It is about respecting the belongings of others, not taking advantage of people, and not claiming credit for work that is not our own. It is an antidote to the poison of greed, and its practice leads to a mind that is at ease, free from the anxiety of wanting what others have. The third is to refrain from sexual misconduct. This is a practice of cultivating deep respect and care within our relationships. It is about not causing harm to ourselves or others through our sexual energy. It means honoring our commitments, being honest with our partners, and not treating others as objects for our own gratification. It is a commitment to cherishing intimacy and protecting the hearts of others. The fourth precept, as we have already discussed, is to refrain from false speech. Its inclusion here underscores that speech is action with profound karmic consequences. And the fifth precept is to refrain from intoxicants that lead to heedlessness. This is a practice of cultivating and protecting our mental clarity. The issue with drugs and alcohol, from this perspective, is not that they are inherently evil, but that they cloud the mind. A mind that is clouded is one in which the seeds of greed, hatred, and delusion can sprout unchecked. Under the influence of intoxicants, we are far more likely to break the other four precepts, saying things we regret and doing things that cause harm. This precept is about valuing our awareness as our most precious tool on the path to freedom. The most hopeful and empowering message of karma is this: it is not fate. The past has happened. The seeds of our previous actions have been sown, and their results may be ripening in our lives today. We cannot change that, but the present moment is always a new opportunity. The field is always ready for new seeds, regardless of what kind of garden we have cultivated in the past. Right now, in this very moment, we have the power to plant a different kind of seed. We can choose an act of kindness over an act of anger. We can choose a word of generosity over a word of greed. Each time we do this, we are planting a wholesome seed that will, in time, bear wholesome fruit. It is like having a stream that has become muddy. We cannot go back and stop the mud from entering upstream, but we can, right now, begin pouring fresh, clear water into the stream. Slowly, but surely, the clear water will begin to purify the entire flow. We are not prisoners of our past. We are the architects of our future, creating it one intentional action at a time. A great portion of our actions, the majority of the karmic seeds we plant day after day, take place within the context of our work. The way we spend our days, the way we earn our money to support ourselves and our families, is a field in which we are constantly acting. If our actions truly shape our reality, then the work we perform for 8 or more hours a day must have a profound impact on our well-being and the well-being of the world. This raises a vital question. How can we engage in the world of work in a way that aligns with this path of non-harming and cultivates peace instead of stress? This naturally leads us to explore the next fold of the path, the wisdom of right livelihood. Having established that our every action, our karma, is a seed that shapes our reality, we must now turn our attention to the field where most of these seeds are sown, our work. For the majority of us, the hours spent earning a living constitute the largest single portion of our waking lives. This domain can be a source of immense stress, anxiety, and a feeling of hollow meaninglessness, a place where we feel we must compromise our values just to get by. Or it can become an integral and even joyful part of our spiritual path. The guidance for this transformation is found in the principle of right livelihood, or sama ajiva. This is the art of engaging with the world of commerce and work in a way that is ethical, beneficial, and aligned with our deepest aspirations for peace, for ourselves, and for others. It is about finding purpose beyond the paycheck. Right livelihood has both an outer and an inner dimension. The outer dimension is the more straightforward one. It concerns the nature of the work itself, the what that we do. The Buddha was quite specific about this, encouraging his followers to avoid professions that are fundamentally based on causing harm. The classical list includes 5 types of commerce to be avoided: dealing in weapons, which directly facilitates violence; dealing in living beings, which includes slavery, prostitution, and raising animals for slaughter, all of which exploit and end life; dealing in meats and flesh, which results from killing; dealing in poisons, things designed to harm and destroy; and dealing in intoxicants, which cloud the mind and lead to heedlessness. In our modern complex economy, we can expand this principle to look deeply at any industry that has harm as its primary output. Does our work depend on exploiting people, destroying the environment, propagating deceit, or fueling addiction and division? This is the baseline of right livelihood, to do no harm. It asks us to look honestly at how our daily work impacts the interconnected web of life. Beyond simply avoiding harm, the outer practice of right livelihood encourages us to find work that is actively helpful, that contributes positively to the well-being of society. This doesn't mean we all must become doctors or aid workers. The forms of helpful work are as varied as human society itself. A teacher who awakens the minds of children, a chef who prepares wholesome food with care, an artist who creates beauty that uplifts the human spirit, a software engineer who builds tools that connect people in meaningful ways, a plumber who ensures families have clean water, and sanitation. All of these can be forms of right livelihood. The key is the intention to serve, to offer a skill or a product that genuinely makes people's lives better, even in a small way. This leads us to the inner dimension of right livelihood, which is in many ways more subtle, more powerful, and more universally accessible. For what if you are in a job that feels neutral or even crushingly mundane? What if, due to circumstances, you are not in a position to change your career right now? The wisdom of the path teaches that right livelihood is not just about what you do, but about how you do it. This is where we learn to bring mindfulness and purpose into any job, transforming it from the inside out. It is about remembering that the quality of our consciousness is more important than the title on our business card. We can practice mindfulness while stocking shelves in a supermarket, being fully present with the shape and weight of each can. We can practice deep listening while on a customer service call, offering our full attention as a gift to a frustrated person. We can treat the writing of a routine email with the same care and focus as a work of art, by bringing our full presence to each task. No matter how small, we infuse it with dignity. We reclaim our time and our energy from the realm of mindless drudgery and transform it into a continuous practice of meditation. The most powerful tool for this inner transformation is purpose. There is a timeless story that illustrates this perfectly. A traveler came upon a large construction site and saw 2 men working under the hot sun, laying bricks. He approached the first man, whose face was etched with resentment and exhaustion. "My good man," the traveler asked, "what is it that you are doing?" The worker scowled and grumbled without looking up. "I'm laying bricks. It's back-breaking work. The sun is relentless, and the pay is barely enough to live on. I'm just putting one brick on top of another until the day is done. The traveler moved on and approached the second man. This man was also sweating under the same sun, performing the exact same task, but he worked with a focused, rhythmic grace and a quiet look of contentment on his face. The traveler asked him the same question. "What is it that you are doing?" The man stopped for a moment, looked up at the rising walls around him, and a smile touched his lips. He turned to the traveler and said, "I am building a great cathedral." Both men had the same job, the same bricks, the same sun, and the same pay. The only difference was their perspective. The first man was trapped in the smallness of his task. The second man had connected his small, repetitive action to a larger, meaningful purpose. This shift in perspective is available to every single one of us, in any job. The person cleaning a hospital room can see themselves not just as a cleaner, but as someone creating a sterile, safe environment for healing to occur. The accountant can see themselves not just as someone crunching numbers, but as someone ensuring the integrity and stability of an organization that employs many people. We can learn to find the cathedral in our daily work. Of course, we must be practical. We live in a world with bills to pay, families to support, and financial obligations to meet. The path of right livelihood does not demand that we all become destitute idealists. The key is to find the skillful balance between our material needs and our spiritual integrity. The practice is not about judging ourselves for the work we have to do right now. It is about starting where we are. We begin by bringing mindfulness and a positive intention into our current job. We look for small ways to increase benefit and reduce harm within our existing role. Perhaps it means being a kinder colleague, a more honest salesperson, or a more encouraging manager. And if we find ourselves in a profession that is fundamentally at odds with our values, the practice becomes one of mindfully and patiently creating a plan to transition over time into work that is more aligned. It is about the direction we are facing, the intention we are cultivating, not about achieving an impossible perfection overnight. When we adopt this perspective, the entire landscape of our work life changes. It is no longer just a place to earn a wage. It becomes a spiritual gymnasium. A difficult boss becomes our teacher of patience. A tight deadline becomes a training ground for staying calm under pressure. A boring, repetitive task becomes an opportunity to develop unwavering concentration. Unfair criticism becomes a laboratory for observing the ego's fiery reaction without being consumed by it. Every day at work, we are presented with countless opportunities to practice generosity, integrity, patience, and compassion. Seen in this light, our work ceases to be an obstacle to our spiritual life. It becomes the very arena in which it unfolds. To walk this path of right speech, right action, and right livelihood requires immense fortitude. It demands a quality of mind that is resilient, clear, and energetic. It is easy to have good intentions when we are calm and rested, but it is another thing entirely to maintain them in the face of stress, fatigue, and conflict. This raises a crucial question. How do we cultivate the skillful energy and mental stamina needed to not just begin this path, but to sustain our journey upon it? This need for balanced and persistent energy leads us directly to the next element of the path, the wisdom of right effort. We have now laid out a path of profound transformation, a way of living guided by right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Faced with this noble but challenging prospect, our first instinct might be one of forceful determination. We might imagine that spiritual progress requires a kind of heroic, white-knuckled effort, a constant struggle against our own weaknesses. We might grit our teeth, determined to suppress every negative thought and compel ourselves into a state of purity. But this approach, born of tension and self-aggression, is like trying to grab water with a clenched fist. The harder we squeeze, the more it slips through our fingers. The wisdom of the path offers a different kind of energy, a different quality of striving. It is called right effort, or sama vayama, and it is not about applying more effort, but about applying wise effort. It is the discovery of a middle way, a path of balance that avoids the pitfalls of two debilitating extremes. The supreme example of this discovery is the life story of the Buddha himself. He did not arrive at this understanding through theory, but through the raw, lived experience of his own body and mind. He first lived the extreme of sensual indulgence. As Prince Siddhartha, he was surrounded by every imaginable pleasure. He lived in palaces designed for every season, shielded from any sight of suffering, old age, or death. He had the finest foods, the most beautiful music, the most luxurious silks. He had everything our modern world tells us should bring complete and lasting happiness. Yet, in the midst of this perfect material world, he felt a deep and gnawing spiritual unease, a sense that something vital was missing. He realized that chasing after pleasant experiences was a dead end. It only fueled more desire, more craving, and a subtle, underlying fear that these pleasures would inevitably fade, as all things do. And so, he renounced his palace and swung to the opposite pole, the extreme of severe asceticism. Believing that he could liberate his spirit by punishing his body, he became a wandering ascetic and subjected himself to the most grueling practices imaginable. He held his breath until he felt his head would explode. He slept on beds of thorns. He exposed his body to the blistering sun and the freezing cold. And most famously, he practiced extreme fasting, reducing his food intake to a few grains of rice a day until his ribs stuck out like the rafters of a ruined barn. His eyes sank deep into their sockets, and he was little more than skin and bone. He pushed human endurance to its absolute limit. Yet, after 6 years of this brutal self-torture, he found himself no closer to the truth. His body was wrecked, his mind was weakened and clouded with pain, and the ultimate answers he sought remained elusive. He had proven to himself that punishing the body does not free the mind. It was in this moment of near-death despair that the great insight arose. He remembered a simple, pure moment from his childhood, sitting in the cool shade of a rose-apple tree while his father performed a state ceremony. In that moment, a natural state of peaceful, focused joy had arisen in him, a state free from both sensual craving and self-inflicted pain. He realized then that this wholesome pleasure, this sense of well-being, was not an enemy to be feared, but a healthy and necessary part of the path. It was the key. He understood that the path to liberation was not a war against the self, but a compassionate embrace of a middle way. At that moment, a young village girl named Sujata offered him a bowl of nourishing rice milk. He accepted it, breaking his long fast. With his strength returned, and his mind now clear and balanced, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and finally awakened. This principle of balanced energy is beautifully captured in a story about one of the Buddha's monks, a man named Sona. Sona had been a wealthy and delicate young man, and to prove his dedication, he practiced with ferocious intensity. He practiced walking meditation day and night, pacing back and forth until the soles of his feet were cracked and bleeding. Yet for all his effort, his mind was still filled with turmoil, and he made no spiritual progress. He grew deeply discouraged, thinking to himself that the path was not for him, and that perhaps he should return to his comfortable life as a layman. The Buddha, with his clairvoyant understanding, knew Sona's thoughts and appeared before him. He asked, "Sona, is it true that before you became a monk, you were a skilled musician, an expert at playing the lute?" Sona replied that he was. The Buddha then asked, "Tell me, Sona, what happens if you tune the string of your lute too tightly?" Sona answered, "Venerable sir, if the string is too tight, it will snap." "And what happens?" the Buddha continued, "if you tune the string too loosely?" "Sir," Sona replied, "if it is too loose, it will not make any sound." "But what happens, Sona, if you tune it just right, not too tight and not too loose, but perfectly balanced in the middle?" Sona's face lit up. "Then, sir, the lute will produce a beautiful, rich, and harmonious melody." The Buddha smiled. "In the same way, Sona, energy that is too strained leads to restlessness and agitation, and energy that is too lax leads to laziness and lethargy. Therefore, Sona, you must cultivate an energy that is balanced, like the well-tuned lute string. Find the harmony in your spiritual faculties, and make that your aim." This story provides the perfect image for right effort. It is not about force, but about finesse. It is not about how hard we try, but how skillfully we apply our energy. To help us do this, the teaching provides a practical framework known as the 4 great efforts. The first is the effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising. This is the practice of being a wise and vigilant gatekeeper of your mind. You learn to recognize the early warning signs of anger, greed, or jealousy. When you feel that first spark of irritation, instead of feeding it with angry thoughts, you make a gentle effort to apply an antidote. You take a deep, calming breath, or you deliberately bring to mind a feeling of kindness. You nip the weed in the bud before it takes root. The second is the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. Sometimes we are not quick enough, and a storm of anger or anxiety has already taken over. The wrong effort here is to suppress it or to feel guilty about it. The right effort is to turn towards it with mindfulness. We acknowledge its presence without judgment. "Ah, I see that anger is here." We observe it, feel its energy in the body, and gently, compassionately, let it go, like releasing a tightly clenched fist. The third is the effort to arouse and develop wholesome states that are not yet present. This is the joyful and proactive side of the practice. It is not just about getting rid of the negative, but about actively cultivating the positive. We can make a conscious effort to generate feelings of kindness, generosity, gratitude, and compassion, perhaps through specific meditations, or by deliberately reflecting on the good in our lives and in others. And the fourth is the effort to maintain and nurture the wholesome states that are already here. When a moment of genuine peace, joy, or love arises, we often let it slip by unnoticed. The right effort is to recognize it, to savor it, to let it sink in and nourish us. By doing so, we strengthen these positive pathways in our minds and make it more likely that these states will arise again in the future. In our modern lives, we are constantly oscillating between the two extremes Sona experienced. We have the tight string of burnout culture, working to the point of exhaustion, fueled by caffeine and anxiety, and we have the loose string of procrastination and distraction collapsing on the couch, endlessly scrolling through our phones, too drained to do anything meaningful. Right effort is the sustainable middle path. It is the wisdom of the marathon runner who paces themselves for the long journey, not the sprinter who burns out after the first 100 yards. With this understanding of balanced energy, this well-tuned lute string of the mind, we are now properly equipped for the next stage of our journey. With a mind that is not too agitated and not too dull, we can turn our attention inward to the deeply transformative work of cultivating the beautiful qualities of the heart. The middle way gives us the stability and the strength to undertake this practice with joy and patience. We are now ready to learn how to actively water the seeds of unconditional love and friendliness in the garden of our own heart. With our minds tuned like a fine instrument, neither too tense with striving nor too slack with lethargy, we are now ready to play the most beautiful music of the heart. Having established a balanced and skillful energy through right effort, we can now turn to the joyful task, not just of avoiding the negative, but of actively cultivating the positive. We begin with the most foundational of all heart practices, the radiant source from which all other virtues flow. It is called metta, a word often translated as loving kindness, but which also carries the meaning of unconditional friendliness, goodwill, and gentle acceptance. This is not the transactional, conditional love we so often encounter in the world, the love that says, "I will love you if you meet my needs," or "I love you because you are mine." Metta is something far more vast and liberating. It is like the sun, which shines its warmth down on everything without discrimination, on the beautiful flower and the thorny weed, on the saint and the sinner. It is a steady, unconditional, and heartfelt wish for the genuine happiness and well-being of all beings, starting with ourselves. Metta is the direct and powerful antidote to the second of the great poisons that afflict the mind, hatred or aversion. While the practice of mindfulness allows us to observe anger when it arises, the practice of metta allows us to actively dissolve it and replace it with its opposite. It is like pouring cool, clear water upon a smoldering fire. You cannot be genuinely wishing someone well and feeling anger towards them in the very same moment. They are mutually exclusive states of mind. By systematically cultivating the intention of goodwill, we begin to change the very chemistry of our inner world. The hardened grounds of resentment, irritation, judgment, and ill will begin to soften, creating a fertile soil where connection and peace can grow. The practice of cultivating metta, known as metta bhavana, begins in a place that may seem radical to many of us, especially in a Western culture, often rife with self-criticism. It begins with ourselves. This is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of profound wisdom. You cannot offer water to a thirsty person if your own cup is empty. You cannot radiate a warmth you do not feel. If our relationship with ourselves is one of constant judgment and harshness, any love we try to offer others will feel strained, inauthentic, or will be offered from a place of depletion. And so, the first step is to learn to be an unconditional friend to yourself. You find a quiet posture, close your eyes, and gently begin to repeat a few simple, powerful phrases directed at your own heart. Phrases such as, "May I be happy. May I be healthy and strong. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I live with ease." We are not trying to force a feeling, but simply planting these intentional seeds in the garden of the mind. For many, this is the most difficult step, but it is also the most essential. It is a recognition that you, in all your imperfection, are a living being who, like all beings, has a deep and fundamental wish to be happy and free from suffering. Once a glimmer of this warmth and self-acceptance has been established, we begin to expand the circle. The next step is to bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom it is very easy to feel love and appreciation. It could be a mentor, a family member, a pet. You visualize them clearly in your mind's eye, and you extend the very same wishes to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy and strong. May you be safe. May you live with ease. The purpose of this stage is to allow the feeling of metta to flow easily and naturally, to awaken its energy in a context where there is no resistance. We bathe this loved one in the radiant light of our goodwill, feeling the joy that comes from wishing another well. Next, We stretch the muscle of the heart. We bring to mind a neutral person. This might be a cashier at a grocery store, a person we see on our daily commute, someone we know of but have no strong feelings about one way or the other. We hold their image in our mind and extend the exact same phrases of loving kindness to them. This is a crucial step. It begins to break down the walls of indifference that we so often build around ourselves. It challenges the mind's habit of categorizing people into important and unimportant. It is the recognition that this neutral person, just like us, and just like our loved one, also wants to be happy and free from suffering. We are training our heart to offer its warmth simply because they are a fellow living being, not because of what they can do for us. Now comes the most challenging and transformative stage of the practice. We are asked to bring to mind a difficult person. This is someone with whom we have conflict, someone who has hurt us, or someone whose actions we strongly disapprove of. The aim here is absolutely not to condone their harmful behavior or to force ourselves into some kind of artificial forgiveness or liking. The aim is to see that this person is also a suffering being. Their harmful actions are born from their own inner poisons, their own greed, hatred, and ignorance. They create suffering for others because they themselves are suffering. With this wisdom, we try, as best we can, to extend the wish of metta to them. May you be free from the anger that causes you to harm others. May you find the peace that I am seeking for myself. This practice is a profound act of self-liberation. It frees us from the heavy, toxic burden of carrying around anger and resentment. We do it not for them, but for our own peace of mind. Finally, having worked with these specific individuals, we break down all the barriers. We allow the feeling of metta to radiate outwards in all directions, boundlessly. We offer it to all the people in our home, our city, our country. We extend it to all beings on this planet, friends and enemies, humans and animals, all creatures great and small. We extend it throughout the entire cosmos, to all beings in all realms, seen and unseen. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings everywhere be free. In this final stage, the heart transcends all categories and boundaries, and we touch a state of universal, unconditional love that is our true nature. The power of this practice is not merely metaphorical. There is a famous story from the life of the Buddha that illustrates its tangible force. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to assassinate him. As part of his plot, he arranged for the fiercest royal elephant, Nalagiri, to be intoxicated with alcohol, making it uncontrollably enraged. The elephant was then released onto the narrow street, where the Buddha was calmly walking. Seeing the beast charging towards them, trumpeting with fury and destroying everything in its path, people screamed and ran for their lives. The Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, bravely stepped in front of him to shield him, but the Buddha gently told him to stand aside. He stood perfectly still, facing the charging elephant, and did not show a trace of fear. Instead, he radiated an immense, powerful, and unwavering field of pure metta directly at the enraged animal. As Nalagiri entered this powerful field of loving kindness, a change began to occur. Its charge slowed. Its eyes, which had been red with rage, softened. Its trumpeting ceased. The immense beast grew calm, walked peacefully up to the Buddha, lowered its great head, and knelt before him. The story teaches a profound truth. A heart filled with unconditional love is more powerful than the most terrifying display of violence. It can tame the wildness in others, and more importantly, it can tame the fear and anger within ourselves. Practicing metta regularly changes our experience of the world. It reduces social anxiety, as we begin to see strangers not as threats, but as potential friends. It enhances our relationships, as we become less critical and more appreciative of those we love. Most of all, it creates a warm, resilient, and joyful inner atmosphere, a portable home of peace that we can carry with us wherever we go. But metta is the sincere wish for all beings to be happy. What happens when we are confronted not with potential happiness, but with active, present suffering? Our heart, softened and opened by metta, naturally yearns to respond in a new way. This wish for beings to be free from suffering is the dawn of the next great quality of the heart, compassion. If loving kindness, or metta, is the sun that wishes for all flowers to bloom, then its twin flame, compassion, or karuna, is the gentle rain that falls on a parched and thirsty land. One is the wish for all beings to find happiness. The other is the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. They are two sides of the same open heart. When a heart that has been softened by metta encounters the reality of pain, it trembles. This trembling is karuna. It is not the tremble of fear or aversion, but the tremble of resonance, of profound connection. It is the heart's natural response to witnessing suffering, and from this trembling arises the powerful aspiration to help, to soothe, to alleviate the pain in whatever way we can. In our everyday language, we often confuse compassion with other states of mind, and it is crucial to understand the difference. The first is pity. When we feel pity for someone, we often look down upon them from a position of perceived superiority. We see their misfortune and think, "Oh, you poor thing. I am so glad that isn't me." Pity creates distance. It reinforces the separation between me, the fortunate one, and you, the unfortunate one. It is rooted in the ego's need to feel better by comparison. Compassion, on the other hand, is built on a sense of equality. It recognizes that your suffering could be my suffering. It closes the distance and says, "We are in this together." A closer relative to compassion is empathy, the ability to feel with someone, to resonate with their emotional state. Empathy is a vital human capacity and a necessary ingredient of compassion. However, empathy alone can be dangerous. If we only feel another's pain without wisdom and strength, we can become overwhelmed. This is often called empathic distress or burnout. We absorb the suffering of others until we are so drowned in it that we become paralyzed, anxious, and have to withdraw to protect ourselves. We see this in caregivers, in activists, in anyone who works on the front lines of human pain. They burn out because their empathy is not balanced with the other elements of compassion. True karuna is empathy plus wisdom and strength. It is the ability to stand firm and present in the face of pain, to feel it without being consumed by it. It is the courage to keep your heart open, even when it hurts. From this stable, grounded place, a wise and effective desire to help can emerge. Compassion is empowering. Raw empathy can be debilitating. It is the difference between drowning with someone and skillfully extending a rope to pull them ashore. Just as with loving kindness, the practice of compassion must begin with ourselves. For many of us, this is the most difficult work of all. We live with a harsh inner critic that berates us for our mistakes, our failures, and our pain. When we suffer, we often tell ourselves to get over it, to be strong, or we numb ourselves to avoid feeling the hurt. Self-compassion is the radical act of turning towards our own suffering with the same tenderness, warmth, and care that we would offer to a beloved friend who is struggling. It means acknowledging our pain with mindfulness. This is a moment of suffering. It means reminding ourselves of our shared humanity. Suffering is a part of life. I am not alone in this. And it means actively offering ourselves kindness, perhaps by placing a hand on our heart and speaking soothing words to ourselves. Without a foundation of self-compassion, our efforts to help others will be unsustainable. We will burn out, and our actions may be tainted by our own unhealed wounds. By learning to be a compassionate witness to our own pain, we develop the resilience to be a compassionate presence for others. This practice is the direct antidote to the cruelty and indifference that we see in the world. In an age of non-stop information, we are bombarded with images of suffering from across the globe, to the point where it becomes easy to feel numb, to shut down our hearts, simply to survive. This is compassion fatigue. A formal practice of cultivating karuna is like a training regimen for the heart, building its capacity to stay open, resilient, and responsive in the face of pain. It is the antidote to the hardening of the heart that leads to cruelty, and the numbness of the heart that leads to indifference. In the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, this boundless compassion is embodied in the archetypal figure of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. The story is told that Avalokiteshvara practiced for eons and finally attained a state of perfect enlightenment, ready to enter the final peace of nirvana. But as he stood on the very threshold of ultimate liberation, he paused. He heard a sound rising up from the worlds below, a great, unified cry, the sound of the suffering of every single being who was still trapped in the cycles of pain and confusion. His heart, perfected in its capacity for love, was so moved by this sound that it shattered with compassion. He made a great and powerful vow: I will not enter final nirvana until every last being, down to the last blade of grass, has been liberated from suffering. As he turned back to face the world, truly taking in the infinite, staggering scope of its pain, his head exploded into 11 pieces, and his arms shattered into 1,000 fragments from the sheer force of his compassionate will to help every one of them. The Buddhas of all directions, seeing his incredible vow and his shattered form, came to his aid. They reassembled him, giving him 11 heads so he could perceive suffering in all directions at once, and 1,000 arms so he could reach out and help in 1,000 different ways. And in the palm of each of his 1,000 hands, they placed an eye of wisdom. This is a crucial detail. It signifies that true, effective compassion is not blind sentimentality. It is always guided by wisdom. It is the union of a soft heart and a clear mind. Avalokiteshvara, with his 1,000 helping hands, represents the active, engaged, and infinitely creative potential of a heart that has the courage to witness all the pain of the world and, instead of despairing, simply grows more hands to help. The practice of compassion does not need to be complicated. It can be woven into the fabric of our day. It begins with acknowledging our own difficulties with kindness. When we hear of the struggles of a friend or a stranger, we can pause for a moment. Instead of just feeling bad for them, we can consciously breathe in, taking in a sense of their pain. And as we breathe out, we can send them a silent wish. May you be free from this suffering. May you find the strength to meet this challenge. May you find peace. This simple shift in intention, from passive pity to an active wish for freedom from pain, is the essence of cultivating karuna. With a heart that has learned to wish for the happiness of others through metta, and to wish for the freedom from suffering for others through karuna, we are faced with new questions. How do we respond when we see others succeeding and finding joy? And how do we ourselves maintain our inner balance when we are touched by both the profound sorrows and the great joys of the world? This leads us to the final two great qualities of the heart, the capacities for sympathetic joy and unshakable equanimity. Our journey into the heart has shown us how to respond skillfully to the fundamental states of being. With loving kindness, or metta, we learn to share in the wish for all beings to be happy. With compassion, or karuna, we cultivate the courage to meet suffering our own and others with a wish for it to be healed. But our human experience is not limited to just these two poles. What is our response when we witness the good fortune of others? And how do we remain stable and sane in a world that is constantly changing? A world that delivers both victory and defeat, pleasure and pain, often in the same day. To complete this cultivation of a truly resilient and boundless heart, we must now explore the final two of what are known as the four immeasurables, or the Brahma-viharas, sympathetic joy and equanimity. The third of these divine abidings is mudita, which translates as sympathetic or appreciative joy. It is the ability to feel genuine, wholehearted happiness at the success, good fortune, and happiness of other people. Mudita is the direct and powerful antidote to one of the most corrosive poisons of the human heart, envy. In our competitive culture, we are often conditioned to view life as a zero-sum game. When we hear that a colleague received a promotion, a friend has fallen in love, or a neighbor is going on a wonderful vacation, what is our first, habitual reaction? For many of us, a subtle shadow falls across the heart. A voice whispers, "Why them and not me?" We compare, we feel a sense of lack. Our own life suddenly seems diminished. This is the bitter taste of envy and jealousy. It is a self-imposed poison that shrinks our world and prevents us from sharing in the happiness that surrounds us. Mudita is the conscious choice to cultivate the opposite response. It is the radical recognition that happiness is not a limited resource. When we hear of another's good fortune, we can train ourselves to pause, and instead of contracting into comparison, we can consciously expand with joy for them. We can think, "How wonderful for you. I am so happy that you are experiencing this joy." We can feel it as if it were our own success. This practice costs us nothing, and yet it has the magical ability to multiply the amount of joy in our own lives and in the world. When we rejoice in the happiness of others, our own heart becomes lighter and more spacious. We are freed from the cramped, lonely prison of envy and begin to experience a profound sense of connection and shared abundance. Every piece of good news we hear becomes a source of our own happiness. The final quality, upekkha, or equanimity, is the crown jewel of the four, the one that holds and balances all the others. It is a state of profound mental balance, a spacious and unshakable calm that allows us to face the vicissitudes of life with an open heart and a steady mind. We live our lives at the mercy of what the Buddha called the 8 worldly winds, 4 pairs of opposites that constantly blow us off course. They are praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and pleasure and pain. Our ordinary happiness is completely dependent on these winds. We feel elated when we receive praise, and crestfallen when we are blamed. We are joyful when we gain something we want, and miserable when we lose it. We soar when we are famous and popular, and sink when we are ignored or shamed. Our inner peace is as fickle and unpredictable as the weather, constantly being tossed about by external circumstances beyond our control. Equanimity is the practice of cultivating an inner center of gravity so profound that we are no longer thrown off balance by these winds. It is crucial to understand that equanimity is not indifference. This is its most common misunderstanding. Indifference is a form of aversion, a closing down of the heart. It is a cold, withdrawn state that says, "I don't care." This is its near enemy. True upekkha is the opposite. It is a state of maximum engagement with life, but without being hooked by it. The heart remains open, warm, and capable of feeling metta, karuna, and mudita. But the mind is not pulled into the drama of attachment and aversion. It is a warm, spacious, and caring balance. The classic image for a mind filled with equanimity is that of a great, ancient mountain. Picture this mountain, its peaks reaching into the sky, its base rooted deep in the earth. The sun shines brightly upon it, bathing it in warmth. This is like praise and pleasure. Then dark clouds gather, and the cold rain falls. This is like blame and pain. Fierce winds howl across its slopes. This is like gain and loss. Great storms rage, with thunder and lightning. This is like fame and disrepute. Through all of this, the mountain remains. It does not cling to the sunshine and try to push away the storm. It does not complain about the wind or feel pride in its own strength. It is simply present for all of it, allowing the changing weather of life to pass across its surface, while its core remains vast, solid, and utterly unmoved. To cultivate equanimity is to become this mountain in our own heart, to find that place of deep, quiet stillness that the changing fortunes of the world cannot touch. This profound state of balance does not come from willpower or suppression. It arises naturally from the deep, embodied understanding of the wisdom we have already explored on this journey. It is rooted in the wisdom of anicca, or impermanence. When we truly know that all states are temporary, that pleasure and pain, praise and blame, all arise and pass away, we cease to cling to the pleasant and resist the unpleasant with such desperate force. It is rooted in the wisdom of anatta, or no self. When we understand that there is no solid, separate I at the center of our experience to be praised or blamed, we take things less personally. The winds have no solid object to hit, and it is rooted in the wisdom of dependent origination. When we see the impossibly complex web of causes and conditions that lead to any event, we are less inclined to take all the credit for our successes or all the blame for our failures. Equanimity, then, is the serene peace that comes from seeing things as they truly are. These four immeasurables: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity form a complete and perfect practice for the heart. They provide a skillful response to every situation we might encounter. When we meet beings who are struggling, we offer them compassion. When we meet those who are happy, we offer them our sympathetic joy. And underlying it all is the boundless warmth of loving kindness for all beings without exception, held within the vast, stable, and peaceful embrace of equanimity. With a heart that has been so carefully and beautifully cultivated, and a mind that has found its unshakable center, we possess an incredible inner strength. But even with this profound inner peace, we still live in a world of friction. The ego, that old trickster, still has its ways of pulling us into conflict, especially in its persistent need to be right. How do we apply this newfound balance to the small daily conflicts that can still so easily disturb our peace? This leads us to a simple, yet profound story that teaches the art of letting go of the ego's petty battles. There is a particular kind of heat that rises in the chest, a sudden, sharp pressure behind the eyes when we feel wronged. It can be ignited by something small, a dismissive comment in a meeting, the car that cuts us off in traffic, a promise unkept by someone we love. In that moment, the world narrows. Our focus sharpens to a single point: the injustice, the offense, the sheer audacity of the other person. Our mind begins to race, composing arguments, reliving the moment, justifying our indignation. We feel a powerful, compelling urge to react, to shout, to blame, to make our grievance known, to prove that we are right and they are wrong. This feeling is so common, so deeply human that we rarely stop to question its origin. We assume the anger comes from the event itself, from the external world, and the people in it. But an ancient story, one that has drifted down through the centuries from the Taoist sage Zhuangzi, offers a profound and liberating alternative. It asks us to look not at the other boat, but at our own, and to question who, exactly, is steering it. Imagine a man crossing a river in his small boat. The morning mist hangs low over the water, muffling all sound, creating a world of soft, grey stillness. He is a skilled oarsman, and his movements are fluid, his mind calm. He is at one with the river, the boat, the quiet morning. Suddenly, out of the mist, another boat appears, moving directly towards him. With a jolt, it bumps into his own. His first reaction is surprise, perhaps a flicker of annoyance at the interruption. He looks up, ready to call out, to see who this careless person is. But he sees no one. The boat is empty. It has simply broken free from its moorings upstream and is now drifting aimlessly with the current. And in that moment, all his potential anger vanishes. What is there to be angry at? An empty boat is just a piece of wood, subject to the wind and the water. It has no intention, no malice, no awareness. It is simply an object, an event, without a person to blame. The anger has no hook, no place to land. The man simply shrugs, pushes the empty boat away with his oar, and continues his journey, his inner peace barely disturbed. Now, Zhuangzi asks us to imagine the very same scene with one crucial difference. The man is on the river, the mist is the same, the collision is identical, but when he looks up, the other boat is not empty. There is a man in it. Instantly, the entire experience changes. The heat he did not feel before now floods his chest. "Hey!" he shouts across the water. "Watch where you are going, you fool. Are you blind?" He hurls insults. His mind fills with assumptions about the other man's incompetence, his arrogance, his lack of respect. The peaceful morning is shattered. His mind is a storm of agitation and blame. The collision was exactly the same. The gentle bump of wood against wood was identical in both scenarios. Nothing external had changed, except for one thing: his perception that there was someone there, a target for his righteous anger. The problem was never the boat. The problem was the presence of a person, an entity to which he could assign, blame, and feel personally offended by. This simple story holds the key to understanding a vast portion of our daily suffering. Most of the anger, the resentment, the conflict that plagues our lives does not arise from events themselves. It arises from our interpretation of those events as personal attacks. The world is full of empty boats, occurrences that are random, unintentional, or simply the result of other people's own complex causes and conditions, having little or nothing to do with us. A colleague who seems curt in an email might be dealing with a family emergency. A driver who speeds past may be rushing to the hospital. Someone who disagrees with our deeply held belief isn't necessarily attacking us. They are simply expressing a view shaped by a lifetime of different experiences. But we don't see empty boats. We see boats filled with people who are deliberately, personally, and maliciously targeting us. And the us they are targeting is our ego. This sense of a solid, permanent, and vastly important me is the passenger in our own boat. This passenger, this ego, is a tireless defender of its own territory. Its primary job is to maintain its own sense of validity and importance. It defines itself by its beliefs, its accomplishments, its possessions, its reputation. When any of these are challenged, the ego perceives it as a threat to its very existence, and it reacts with ferocious defensiveness. The most powerful weapon in its arsenal is the need to be right. This need is the source of endless arguments with our partners, our family, and our friends. We fight not because the topic at hand, the color of a wall, or the correct way to load a dishwasher is truly important. We fight because to be proven wrong feels like a small death to the ego. It feels like a public declaration of our inadequacy. And so we argue, we escalate, we say hurtful things, we damage trust, all in service of this phantom passenger in our boat, this desperate need to be right. We exhaust ourselves fighting battles that have no victor, draining our life force to protect a sense of self that is, in reality, as fluid and transient as the river itself. The profound practice that emerges from this parable is the art of emptying one's own boat. This does not mean becoming passive, weak, or without a point of view. It means consciously choosing to untether your actions and your sense of well-being from the ego's desperate need for validation. It is a radical shift in orientation. You learn to act without needing recognition. You do excellent work because you value excellence, not because you crave the boss's praise. You help a neighbor because compassion moves you, not because you want to be seen as a good person. You create art or music or a garden because the act of creation itself is fulfilling, not because you need the world to call you an artist. You empty the boat of the need for an audience. Furthermore, you learn to speak without needing others to agree. You can state your truth, share your perspective, offer your opinion, clearly and kindly, and then let it go. You release the frantic desire to convert everyone to your point of view. You understand that their boat has its own passenger, its own history, its own direction. By releasing the need for their agreement, you grant them the grace of their own journey, and you grant yourself the freedom from pointless conflict. You can have a conversation instead of a battle. You can seek to understand instead of seeking to win. When you are no longer fighting to defend a position, you can become curious, open, and truly listen. This is not easy. When the bump comes, the instinct to shout is powerful. The practice lies in creating a tiny space between the event and your reaction. In that space, you can ask the crucial question, is this boat empty? In that moment of mindful pause, you can see the situation with a flash of clarity. You can recognize the rising heat in your chest as the ego's defense mechanism kicking in. You can choose to see a person who is likely wrapped up in their own struggles, their own story, rather than an enemy who is intentionally targeting you. You can choose to see a drifting, empty boat instead of a malicious attacker. In that space, you can take a breath and let the wave of anger pass through you without sweeping you away. You can push the boat gently aside and continue on your way. The freedom that comes from this practice is immense. It is the liberation from the exhausting, full-time job of ego defense. Life will continue to send boats bumping into you. People will be careless. They will disagree with you. They will act in ways you don't understand. But when your own boat is empty, these collisions are merely events. They are no longer personal indictments. The anger simply has nowhere to land. There is no one inside to take offense. You become less like a rigid fortress, anxiously guarding its walls, and more like the open sky, allowing the clouds of circumstance to drift by without leaving a trace. When we stop wasting our energy on these small, draining battles of the ego, a new space opens up within us. It is a space of quiet, a space of clarity. It is a space where we can begin to explore something far deeper than the mere absence of anger, a state that goes beyond the fleeting happiness we so often chase. This is the space where we can discover true, unshakable peace. We spend so much of our lives on a quest, a relentless pursuit of something we call happiness. From our earliest years, We are taught to see it as a destination, a prize to be won at the end of a long struggle. We construct our lives around a series of if-onlys. If only I get that degree. If only I land that promotion. If only I lose 20 pounds. If only I buy that house, find that perfect partner, take that dream vacation. Then, we believe, I will be happy. This happiness is pictured as a bright, sunny plateau, where all our anxieties will cease and a permanent state of satisfaction will begin. We chase after it with immense energy, arranging the external world to match the blueprint in our minds. And sometimes we succeed. We get the job, we buy the car, we find the relationship. A wave of pleasure washes over us, a feeling of exhilaration and relief. For a moment, we feel we have arrived. The chase was worth it. But then, something curious happens. The feeling, as bright and wonderful as it is, begins to fade. The new car becomes just the car. The promotion brings with it new pressures and longer hours. The perfect relationship reveals itself to be a union of two imperfect human beings. The initial joy, which felt so solid, proves to be as ephemeral as a morning mist. And as the glow recedes, the old familiar restlessness returns, the low-grade hum of dissatisfaction. And so, the mind begins to search for a new target, a new if only. Perhaps it wasn't the job, it was the next job. Perhaps it wasn't that house, but a bigger one, in a better neighborhood. The chase begins again. We live our lives on this treadmill, believing that with enough speed and effort, we will finally reach a place of lasting contentment, failing to notice that the treadmill's very nature is to keep us in perpetual motion, always striving, never arriving. This is the fundamental predicament of seeking happiness in the world of conditions. The kind of happiness we are conditioned to pursue is, by its very nature, unstable, because it is conditional. Its existence depends entirely on external factors aligning with our desires. It is a state that requires getting what we want and successfully avoiding what we do not want. This framework for living is built upon the very foundations of suffering that the Buddha identified, the three poisons of greed, aversion, and delusion. Greed, or grasping, is the engine of the chase, the constant craving for pleasant sights, sounds, tastes, feelings, and ideas. It is the I must have this to be happy mentality. Aversion, or resistance, is the opposite side of the same coin. It is the pushing away of all that is unpleasant, the fear of failure, of loss, of discomfort, of pain. Our fragile happiness is held hostage between these two forces, a tense and precarious balancing act. We live in a state of constant, low-level anxiety, trying to protect our pleasant experiences and fend off the unpleasant ones. The third poison, delusion, is the master poison, because it is the fundamental misunderstanding that this strategy can ever lead to true, lasting peace. It is the belief that a castle built on the shifting sands of external conditions can ever be a permanent home, because the world is, by its nature, impermanent and uncontrollable. Our conditional happiness is always under threat. Economies collapse, people change their minds, our bodies age and get sick, seasons turn. To base our inner well-being on a foundation that is guaranteed to change is to sign up for a lifetime of anxiety and disappointment. It is a game that cannot be won. We are trying to find security by clinging to things that are, by their very nature, insecure. We are looking for an end to thirst by drinking salt water. The more we get, the thirstier we become. This is not freedom. This is a subtle and exhausting form of bondage. a prison whose walls are built of our own attachments and aversions. The wisdom of the Buddhist path invites us to step off this treadmill entirely. It suggests that there is another way to exist, a state of being that is not dependent on the chaotic ebb and flow of worldly conditions. This is not a bigger, better, shinier version of happiness. It is a state of a completely different quality. In the ancient Pali language, the word is sukha, which can be translated not just as happiness, but as a deep and abiding well-being, a profound contentment. This is true peace. Its defining characteristic is that it is unconditional. It does not rely on getting the promotion or avoiding the illness. It is a quality of the mind itself, a deep inner resource that can be cultivated and accessed, regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in. It is crucial to understand that this state is not one of giddy, euphoric bliss. It is not a perpetual high. In our culture, we associate peace with something spectacular, but its true nature is quiet. It is defined not by the presence of an intense feeling, but by the absence of inner conflict. It is the cessation of the war within. Imagine the feeling of relief when a chronic, nagging pain finally stops. The peace comes not from a new, pleasant sensation being added, but from the torment being taken away. True peace is like this. It is the absence of the frantic grasping of greed. It is the absence of the fearful pushing away of aversion. It is the quiet mind that is no longer at war with reality. It is the profound relief that comes from laying down the heavy burden of our attachments and resistances. This state of well-being is the natural climate of the mind when the storms of the three poisons have subsided. It is not something we need to import from the outside. It is what remains when the inner pollutants are cleared away. There is a powerful analogy used to describe this. Think of your mind as a vast, deep lake. On a beautiful, calm day, the sun shines, there is no wind, and the surface of the lake is like a perfect mirror, reflecting the blue sky and the passing clouds. It is serene and lovely. This is conditional happiness. It is wonderful, but it is entirely dependent on the weather. Now, imagine a storm rolls in. The sky turns dark, the wind begins to howl, and a torrential rain begins to fall. The surface of the lake is transformed. It is churned into a chaos of violent, unpredictable waves. The beautiful, reflective surface is gone, replaced by turmoil. This is life's inevitable difficulty. The loss, the conflict, the disappointment. The surface happiness is obliterated by the storm of changing conditions. Most of us live our entire lives on the surface of this lake. We are utterly at the mercy of the weather, feeling joyful when it is calm and despairing when it is stormy. We put all our energy into trying to control the weather, an impossible task. The practice of cultivating true peace is the practice of learning to access the depths of the lake. For no matter how violent the storm on the surface, if you could sink just 10 or 20 feet down, you would find the water is much calmer. The turmoil above becomes muffled. And if you could sink to the very bottom, to the silent depths, you would find a place of profound, immovable stillness. Down there, the water is utterly tranquil, untouched by the chaos on the surface. The storm is a distant, almost irrelevant event. The depths are always at peace. This is the nature of true well-being. It is learning to find and abide in the silent depths of our own awareness, a place that is untouched by the surface-level storms of our thoughts, emotions, and life circumstances. Peace is not about making the storm stop. It is about realizing that we are not the waves. We are the entire lake. We can learn to rest in that deep, quiet, aware presence that is always there beneath the turbulence. This peace is not something you must acquire. It is something you must uncover. It is your fundamental nature. It is the silence that is always present underneath the noise. The entire path is simply a method for allowing the mud and sediment of the mind, the greed, the aversion, the delusionto settle, so that the natural clarity and stillness of the water can reveal itself. But the question remains, a question for our modern world, full of noise and distraction and endless demands. How can we possibly access these silent depths when we live in a world of constant storms? How do we bring this profound stillness into the heart of a busy, chaotic, and demanding 21st century life? The idea of profound inner peace can often feel like a distant, unattainable dream, reserved for those who make a radical break from the world. We picture a robed figure meditating in the absolute silence of a mountaintop monastery, a life stripped bare of all complexity, free from the incessant demands of email, traffic, deadlines, and social obligations. We look at our own lives, a chaotic symphony of noise and pressure, and we conclude that such peace is simply not for us. The chasm between the monastery and the marketplace seems too wide to cross. We believe that to find that deep stillness we explored, we must first escape the world. But this is the most common and powerful misunderstanding of the path. The goal is not to run away from life, it is to run directly into it, armed with a new set of tools and a completely different perspective. The wisdom of this path teaches that you do not need to leave the world to find peace. The world itself, in all its messy, frustrating, and beautiful glory, is the ultimate monastery. Your life, exactly as it is right now, is your practice ground. The foundation of this practice is a radical reimagining of what meditation is. We tend to think of it as a formal, isolated activity, sitting on a cushion in a quiet room for a set period of time. This formal practice is essential. It is like going to the gym for the mind. It is where you build the core muscle of mindfulness, the capacity to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. But just as the goal of lifting weights is not simply to become good at lifting weights in the gym, the goal of formal meditation is not just to become good at sitting on a cushion. The goal is to bring the strength, stability, and clarity you cultivate in those quiet moments off the cushion and into every corner of your life. The real practice is transforming mundane, everyday activities into moments of profound presence. Consider the simple act of eating. For most of us, a meal is something to be consumed quickly, often while distracted by our phones, the television, or the endless chatter of our own thoughts. Mindful eating transforms this. It begins with seeing the food, truly seeing it, noticing the vibrant colors of the vegetables, the texture of the rice. As you eat, you pay attention to the actual sensations, the taste, the aroma, the feeling of the food in your mouth. You eat slowly, chewing deliberately, savoring each bite. You might even take a moment to reflect on the incredible journey this food has taken to reach your plate: the sun, the rain, the earth, the farmer, the truck driver. In an instant, a rushed, unconscious act becomes a rich, sensory experience, a moment of connection and gratitude. The same principle applies to walking. We spend our lives rushing from point A to point B, our minds 1,000 miles away, planning the future or rehashing the past. A mindful walk is different. Whether it's a walk to your car or a stroll in the park, you bring your attention to the physical act of walking. You feel the soles of your feet making contact with the ground, the rhythm of your own movement, the feeling of the air on your skin. The walk is no longer a means to an end. The walk itself becomes the destination. This can be extended to almost anything. Washing the dishes can be a meditation on the feeling of warm water and the sight of soap bubbles. Listening to music can be an exercise in pure, non-judgmental awareness of sound. And perhaps, most powerfully, you can practice mindful listening. When you are in conversation, you can offer the other person the rare and precious gift of your full, undivided attention. Instead of planning your reply while they speak, instead of filtering their words through your own opinions and judgments, you simply listen. You receive their words. This practice alone can transform your relationships, creating deeper intimacy and understanding. The secret is not to add more activities to your already crowded schedule. It is to infuse the activities you are already doing with a new quality of awareness. Your kitchen becomes a meditation hall. Your office commute becomes a walking retreat. Your life itself becomes the practice. This also means changing your relationship to life's difficulties. Our ingrained habit is to see challenges, conflict, stress, frustration as impediments to our peace, as problems that must be eliminated. The practice invites a revolutionary shift in perspective, to see these very challenges as your most potent opportunities to practice. The difficult person in your life, the colleague who irritates you, the family member who knows exactly how to push your buttons, these people are not just annoyances, they are your greatest teachers. They are mirrors, showing you exactly where your attachments are, where your ego is sensitive, where your boat is not yet empty. Each interaction is a chance to practice patience, to notice the rising of anger and not act on it, to choose compassion over reactivity. The traffic jam, that symbol of modern frustration, can become a meditation bell. Instead of gripping the steering wheel in a rage, you can use that moment of forced stillness to notice the tension in your body, to consciously relax your jaw and shoulders, to return to the simple, physical sensation of your breath. The obstacle becomes the path. Stress itself can be transformed from an enemy into an ally. The feeling of being overwhelmed is a powerful signal. It is your body and mind telling you that you have become lost, that you are caught in anxious thoughts about the future or resentful thoughts about the past. The feeling of stress is the bell of mindfulness, calling you to come home to the present moment, come home to the anchor of your breath. In that moment, you can stop, take one conscious breath, and feel your feet on the floor. You don't have to solve the entire future in that second. All you have to do is be present for one breath. The poison becomes the antidote. You learn to use the very fabric of life, its pleasures and its pains, as the raw material for your awakening. Walking this path in the midst of a noisy world can feel isolating. It can feel like you are trying to swim against a powerful current of distraction and consumerism. This is why the tradition emphasizes the importance of the Sangha, which means community. Finding fellow travelers, whether it is a formal meditation group, a couple of trusted friends, or even an online community, is immensely valuable. These are the people who can offer encouragement when you feel lost, share their own struggles and insights, and remind you that you are not alone on this journey. Community provides a container of support, a shared aspiration that helps to keep the practice alive when your own motivation wanes. There is a final, crucial teaching for those of us walking this path in the world, a parable told by the Buddha about a raft. A man finds himself on the bank of a vast, dangerous river. The shore where he stands is full of fear and turmoil. The other shore represents liberation, safety, and peace. There is no bridge or ferry, so the man gathers logs, vines, and branches, and with great effort, he builds a raft. He uses the raft to paddle safely across the dangerous water, and he finally arrives on the other shore. The Buddha then asks a question: What should this wise man do with the raft? A foolish person might think, this raft was so helpful, it saved my life. I should carry it on my back for the rest of my journey. But this would be an immense burden, preventing him from exploring the very shore he worked so hard to reach. The wise person, the Buddha says, understands that the raft has served its purpose. He expresses his gratitude, and he leaves the raft at the water's edge, continuing his journey on land, light and unencumbered. The teachings, the techniques, the concepts, the ritual soul of itis, the raft, the practice of mindful breathing, the stories, the idea of the empty boat, the label Buddhism, itself, these are indispensable tools designed for a specific purpose, to get you from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom. They are meant to be used, not worshipped. The point is not to become a perfect practitioner of a technique. The point is not to be able to recite all the doctrines. The point is to become free. The raft is not the destination. We must use these practices diligently, but hold them lightly, understanding that they are pragmatic tools, not rigid dogmas. The goal is to internalize the wisdom they point to, so that we no longer need to cling to the tool itself. We can finally step onto the shore of peace and walk freely. This is not a race to a finish line. It is a lifelong journey, a continuous unfolding. The key is not perfection, but persistence, patience, and a compassionate heart, starting right where you are, with a single conscious breath, in the midst of your ordinary, precious, and noisy life. Our journey together began in the quiet of the night, with the recognition of a subtle, yet persistent, hum of discontent. It was the feeling of being adrift, of being troubled by a storm whose origins we couldn't quite name. We began by looking outward, at the world and its demands, for the source of our unease. But our exploration has led us back to a much more intimate place, the landscape of our own mind. We discovered that while life will always shoot a first arrow, the inevitable arrow of pain, loss, and disappointment, it is the second arrow, the one we shoot at ourselves through our reaction, that causes the most profound suffering. We saw that this second arrow is tipped with the ancient poisons of greed, the insatiable wanting for things to be different, aversion, the fearful resistance to reality as it is, and delusion, the fog of misunderstanding that keeps us locked in these reactive cycles. But we did not stop at the diagnosis. We discovered that for every poison, there is a powerful antidote. We found the liberating wisdom in understanding impermanence, the truth that all things arise and pass away, which allows us to hold our joys and our sorrows more lightly. We explored the radical freedom of non-self, the insight that frees us from the exhausting, lifelong burden of defending a fixed and fragile ego. And we were given a set of practical, timeless tools to bring this wisdom into our lives. The simple, profound anchor of the breath to ground us in the present moment. The gentle power of loving kindness to soften our hearts toward ourselves and others. And the skillful balance of the middle path, which guides us between the extremes of indulgence and denial. And so, we arrive here, at the end of this exploration, with a new understanding. Peace is not a destination you must struggle to reach, a distant island paradise where problems cease to exist. It is not the permanent absence of storms. Peace is a way of moving through the world. It is a quality of mind and heart that can be cultivated and nurtured right here, right now, in the midst of your life as it is. It is an inner refuge that you can build, breath by breath, moment by moment. It is not something you find. It is something you become. The power to quiet the inner tempest, to find stillness in the midst of chaos, has been within you all along. You are no longer a helpless victim of the unpredictable currents of your own thoughts and emotions. You now possess a map, a guide to the inner landscape, and a toolkit filled with practices to help you navigate it with skill and grace. The journey ahead is uniquely your own, a path to be walked not with the expectation of perfection, but with a spirit of gentle curiosity. It is a path to be walked with compassion for your stumbles, patience for your progress, and a wisdom that will brighten with every step you take. You have everything you need to begin. The entire journey starts not with a grand gesture, but with the simplest and most profound act of all. It begins with one single, conscious breath.